Chapter 753, These are all fakes. Tenfold the selling price? Is that for real? Zhang Xian asked worriedly, seemingly unconvinced by the attendant's words. Of course. Our spirit emporium prides itself on its credibility, the attendant replied. I see. Since you are willing to go so far to guarantee your credibility, I'll trust you for now. I'll pick out a few more items first before paying for them together later on. Hearing the other party's words, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Credibility? Sun Chang's mouth twitched. An organization that murders others to steal their possessions, what kind of credibility can it possibly have? You've got to be kidding me. The young master actually believes this kind of nonsense? More importantly, regardless of whether the young master believes that or not, we don't have the money to pay for the items. The high-tier spirit stone given to the attendant previously was the prize which the young master obtained back in the master-teacher tournament. With even that gone, they were completely broke. How could they possibly afford the bottleneck-surmounting pill now? Hearing that Zhang Xian was going to pick a few more items, the attendant nodded in excitement. That's fine, feel free to. Since the other party was willing to toss a high-tier spirit stone out so casually, it could only mean that he had no lack of money. Besides, even if he couldn't afford it then, with the security around the spirit emporium, he couldn't possibly take the items away with him as well. The attendants in the spirit emporium were paid on commission depending on the amount of spirit stones they earned for the store. As long as he could seal this deal, he could easily earn a sum greater than the sales commissions he had received over the last few years. Nodding, Zhang Xian walked around the shelves before him, and raising his fan, he pointed to one item after another. This. Soon, he had already pointed out 8 of the items. Seeing Zhang Xian pointing out so many items at once, the attendant's face slowly grew redder and redder. The items placed on display here were the more valuable artifacts in the store, and every single one of them was worth a fortune. Perhaps, he might just be able to earn enough money for his entire life through this deal. The attendant wasn't the only one who was reacting so intensely to Zhang Xian's actions, the crowd in the surroundings had frozen in shock as well. Buying a grade 6 low-tier pill with 2 high-tier spirit stones had already blown their minds, and yet that fellow was still going on a shopping spree. When did such an extravagant, rich man come to Hongyuan City? I'll immediately take those items down for you. The attendant hurriedly took down the items pointed in agitation and began calculating the price. Leave those 8 items aside, wrap the remaining items up for me. Zhang Xian waved his fan casually. Put on. The attendant's knees suddenly caved in at those words, and he nearly collapsed to the ground in astonishment. The lower jaws of the crowd fell to the ground. Even Sun Chang nearly keeled over from those words. He knew that he had often behaved brazenly due to the old master backing, but from the looks of it now, he couldn't even hold a candle to the young master. To put aside the 8 of the items and take everything else. There were at least 100 items on display here, and a large portion of them were weapons and armor, which were valued at several high-tier spirit stones at the very least. To take all of them at once. That would at least cost 100 high-tier spirit stones. Could he definitely afford such a sum? He did know that he'd be pummeled to death if he failed to fork out the money later on, right? After a long moment, the attendant finally recovered sufficiently to ask hoarsely, "You want everything else?" He was still thinking a while ago that, with the commission from those 8 items, he could easily live extravagantly for the rest of his life, but the other party was actually intending to take everything else except for those 8. He had truly stumbled upon the god of fortune this time around. As long as he sealed this deal, he would have sufficient money to feed 10 generations of his descendants. That's right. Wrap them up for me. Zhang Xian waved his hands arrogantly. Yes. The attendant pinched himself hard, and it was only upon feeling the sharp pain that he finally believed he wasn't dreaming. He hurriedly gathered all of the items together and began calculating the price. All in all, there are 93 items, and the total sum is 237 high-tier spirit stones, the attendant said with a quivering voice. 237 high-tier spirit stones. That isn't too expensive. Zhang Xian nodded before gesturing to Sun Chang, butler, pay him. Pay him? Sun Chang froze. You are asking me to pay him? But I don't even have a single high-tier spirit stone on me, what am I supposed to pay him with? Just as Sun Chang was at a loss for what to do, Zhang Xian abruptly raised his hand, seemingly stopping Sun Chang from making a move, before gazing at the pile of items warily. Wait a moment. Are you certain that every single item here is authentic, and if I find any fakes, you will refund me tenfold? Of course. All of the items here were personally verified by a 6-star appraiser, Master Mo Fei. There is definitely no problem with their quality. The attendant swiftly reassured Zhang Xian. I trust you, but I want to be absolutely sure that they are all authentic. How about you invite Master Mo Fei here to appraise them right before me? Only then can I dispel my doubts and buy these items. Zhang Xian said. This. The attendant hesitated for a moment before nodding. All right then. Please wait here for a moment, I will invite Master Mo Fei over this instant. After which, he swiftly rushed off. Well, given the sheer volume of items he is buying, it's natural that he would want them reappraised to ensure that they are authentic. That's true. However, I do know of that Master Mo Fei, and while he's a 6-star appraiser, he is living off the Spirit Emporium's payroll. Are his words really trustworthy? Even if he were to spout nonsense, outsiders like us would be none the wiser. In any case, it seems like that fellow has no lack of money. He is just probably asking for a reappraisal to calm his mind. Taking the scene in sight, the crowd muttered among themselves. Typically speaking, most artifact dealers would seek a third party to appraise their works so as to ensure reliability. However, appraiser Mo Fei was an employee of the Spirit Emporium, and that cast doubt on his reliability. As such, that young man was probably going to be hoodwinked. Amidst the muttering, the attendant finally returned with a pot-bellied old man behind him. The old man harumphed with his chin tilted up proudly. Who wants their item appraised? Appraisers were the most sought-after occupation in the market. Even the head of the Spirit Emporium had to treat him with respect. Me. Zhang Xian folded his fan and pointed it at the stack of items on the table. I want to buy these items, so I need you to appraise them for me. Mo Fei glanced at the items on the table, and his eyebrows shot up. I have already appraised every single one of these items, and there is no doubt about their authenticity. Why? Are you doubting my judgment as a 6-star appraiser? You have appraised everything here. Zhang Xian asked. That's right. What are you waiting for? Bring the appraisal certificates over. Mo Fei waved his hands impatiently. The attendant hurried off to the counter, and after some fumbling, he returned with a pile of papers on hand. These were the appraisal certificates of every single item on the table, and they were all signed off by Mo Fei. I see that there are appraisal certificates for them, good. Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief as he took the appraisal certificates from the attendant and began browsing through them carefully. With a peculiar smile, he asked, I heard that the Spirit Emporium refunds tenfold of the selling price should any items be proven to be a fake, may I confirm if that's true? Of course. Mo Fei nodded proudly. As a 6-star appraiser, he was confident in his appraisals. All right then, I would like to turn your attention to this pill first then. With a light wave of his hand, the jade box containing the grade 6 pill flew into his hand. Why? Are you saying that there's a problem with the bottleneck surmounting pill? Mo Fei frowned. It is written on the appraisal certificate that the vice head of the apothecary school used 81 different types of medicinal herbs to create this pill, which can allow any chrysalis realm expert to raise their cultivation by a stage. Is that true? Of course. Mo Fei flung his sleeves proudly. While this is indeed a grade 6 pill, it wasn't forged by the vice head of the apothecary school. Furthermore, it was forged using on 72 different types of medicinal herbs. Judging by the slight yellow hue of the pill, it seems like the blood essence of a transcendent mortal 9-dan golden grassland antelope. The slightly incongruous fragrance it exudes hints at the addition of a sicklepod flower. Opening the box, Zhang Xian slowly analyzed it bit by bit. In a single breath, he pointed out the various key anomalies regarding the pill. With every single point that he mentioned, Mo Fei's face turned a shade paler. As a 6-star appraiser, he could tell that the other party's judgment was spot on. It was as if the other party was present at the forging process. To be able to deduce all of this in just a short moment, it could only mean to say that the other party's appraising ability was above his. So what if you can list all of the ingredients used in its forging? There are many variations to the bottleneck surmounting pill in the market. As long as it can advance one's cultivation, it can't be considered a fake. Seeing the young man before him go on and on, Mo Fei finally snapped. Advance one's cultivation. Zhang Xian shook his head. After all I have said, you still don't understand. The blood essence of the golden grassland antelope is indeed extremely beneficial to a cultivator, but that is only if it hasn't been mixed with sicklepod flower. Sicklepod flower, otherwise known as the flower of eternal rest, has to be mediated using the heptad verdant grass. However, the apothecary who forged this pill has failed to do so. In other words, not only will this pill not advance one's cultivation, the one who consumes it will even die of poisoning. Zhang Xian said. Die of poisoning? Is that true? If that's the case, that would mean that not only is this pill a fake, it is even a weapon of murder. Hearing those words, everyone leaped in shock. The reason a cultivator would spend their fortune on purchasing a pill was so they could achieve a breakthrough in their cultivation. Yet, not only would they not be able to achieve a breakthrough with this pill, it would even poison them to death. To part with their life savings just to be poisoned, that would be a true tragedy. Nonsense. This pill is rich in spiritual energy, how could it be poisonous? Mo Fei's eyebrows shot up. You don't believe me? Since that's case, bring a pill sample beast over then. We will know the answer with a quick test. Zhang Xian replied impassively. Fine. Mo Fei harumphed. Soon, a pill sample beast was brought over. Pill sample beasts possessed a constitution similar to humans, making them an ideal subject to test for the effect a pill would have on humans. You should do it yourself lest you say that I tampered with the pill sample beast or the bottleneck surmounting pill. Zhang Xian passed the jade box over. Humph. With a cold harumph, Mo Fei rubbed a bit of medicinal powder off the pill and fed it to the pill sample beast. Pill sample beasts were extremely sensitive to poison, thus, a small portion was more than enough for the test. Besides, if he were to take too much, the pill sample beast might end up dying from the excessive influx of spiritual energy from the pill. Gugugugu. As soon as the pill sample beast ate the powder, its aura suddenly intensified, growing stronger swiftly. Its cultivation is rising, this is clearly the effect of a normal bottleneck surmounting pill. What else do you have to say for yourself? Mo Fei turned around and sneered at Zhang Xian for his ignorance. However, at that moment, the pill sample beast's surging aura abruptly came to a halt, and its body began to convulse. Pooh! A mouthful of pitch-black blood spurted from its mouth, and the small white beast abruptly froze before collapsing to the ground. What? It's dead. Could it be that, the pill isn't a bottleneck surmounting pill but poison? That is way too scary. Imagine spending 2 high-tier spirit stones just to buy lethal poison. The Spirit Emporium has truly gone too far this time around. Is this how it conducts business? Seeing the pill sample beast breathing its last, a huge uproar broke out amidst the crowd. They couldn't help but imagine what would have happened if they'd purchased the pill. They would have been filled with expectations for the future when they purchased the pill, only to end up dead due to it. The huge contrast between their expectations and reality was something that made the situation even more unacceptable. That Mo Fei had just confidently declared that the bottleneck-surmounting pill was authentic a moment ago, but a minute later, a pill sample beast was poisoned to death by it. With such a precedent, how could they possibly ever dare to buy any pills from the Spirit Emporium in the future? This. Mo Fei also froze on the spot. In truth, he had carefully calculated the amount of powder to feed the pill sample beast. He was certain that it shouldn't have been sufficient to kill it with the dose he had rubbed off. Yet, it still ended up collapsing in the end. Could the other party be speaking the truth? This pill was not a bottleneck-surmounting pill but a failed product turned into poison. So, is this considered to be a fake? Zhang Xian asked with a cold smile. This. Fine. I admit that my judgment was off for this pill. With the pill sample beast poisoned to death, there was no way he could deny this anymore. Ha, you are saying that your judgment was off for only this pill? Let me tell you, this pill isn't the only thing you are wrong about. Zhang Xian casually waved his hand, and the bronze gong which he had picked out first flew into his hand. According to what you have written in the appraisal certificate, this item was forged by a 6-star blacksmith, and it possesses the ability to wipe out a soul. Even a soul oracle would be utterly destroyed by a single knock on the gong. Indeed. Even though the bronze gong is only a spirit intermediate tier weapon, it has a long history behind it. The lightning energy that has gathered within it over time grants it sufficient power to destroy even a soul oracle. Mo Fei declared proudly. He had studied the bronze gong carefully over a long period of time, so he was confident that there wasn't any mistake in its appraisal. Since you are so confident, why don't we give it a try? Zhang Xian turned to the attendant standing by the side and said, you are a consonant spirit realm cultivator, so you should have already started cultivating your soul as well. If this weapon has the ability to destroy a soul, you should feel a sharp pain in your soul when used against you. At which, he turned to Mo Fei and asked, do you have any disagreements with this test? While the effects of the bronze gong were discounted against most cultivators as their souls would be protected by their physical body, they would still be more or less affected by it. Furthermore, consonant spirit realm experts had barely started cultivating their soul, making them even more prone to any attacks on their soul. I have no objections to it. Mo Fei replied. The crowd who were watching the commotion also nodded in agreement. Soul oracles had already disappeared in the annals of history, so it was impossible to test the bronze gong on them anymore. However, it should work fine against a consonant spirit realm expert as well. I will let you do it. With the edges of his lips curled up, Zhang Xian passed the bronze gong to Mo Fei. Mo Fei took the bronze gong over impatiently, and gathering his jinqi, he struck it powerfully toward the attendant. However, the attendant remained completely unfazed by the attack. In other words, the bronze gong didn't have any effect on the soul. How is this possible? Mo Fei's face turned ghastly pale. Back then, he had even experimented with the bronze gong. The lightning energy it harnessed was extremely effective on souls, capable of even annihilating a soul oracle. Why did its effects vanish all of a sudden? Without that, this would only be an ordinary bronze gong, worth nothing at all. The bronze gong's effect of dealing with souls can only be dispelled by a soul oracle, but the heritage of the soul oracles has already vanished countless years ago. Thus, it is impossible for anyone to have tampered with it. Have I really appraised it wrongly? Mo Fei muttered as cold sweat trickled down his back. Souls were an extremely complex subject, and the only occupation to have truly uncovered their secrets were the soul oracles. They were the only ones who could dispel the effects on the bronze gong. No one else, not even a Saint Realm cultivator, could do the same. However, the soul oracles had already been eradicated by the Master Teacher Pavilion, so it was impossible for anyone to dispel the effects of the bronze gong. Since the effect clearly wasn't there, could his appraisal have been wrong from the very start? It was one thing for him to have made a mistake, but to make two of them consecutively. He was already beginning to doubt his life. Appraisers could only make 3 errors throughout their entire career, and beyond that, they would be stripped of their license. Was his career going to end here? Ignoring Mo Fei's slump, Zhang Xian waved his hands, and a pill cauldron flew in front of him. Moving on, let's talk about this copper cauldron. You have identified it to be a 9-symphony cauldron created by a 6-star blacksmith on the appraisal certificate. It is capable of producing 9 symphony flames, which allows the heat to be distributed more equally throughout the cauldron, thus making it easier to fuse the medicinal herbs together. However, you also stated that it is extremely difficult to tame its spirit and make it acknowledge one as its master. May I confirm that what I have just said is true? This was also another artifact in the Spirit Emporium, and it had an appraisal certificate as well. Yes. Mo Fei nodded. This time, however, his tone wasn't as confident as before. Even though the 9-symphony cauldron increases the chances of successfully forging a pill, it is extremely difficult to make its spirit submit. This is a fact that all appraisers know, so there can't be any mistake on that. Mo Fei gritted his teeth. This isn't the 9-symphony cauldron, and it doesn't have such a troublesome spirit as well. It won't even take me a minute to make it submit to me. Zhang Xian said calmly. You will make it submit in less than a minute? How can that be? If you can do so, I will admit that I am mistaken, and that it is a fake. Mo Fei sneered coldly. You must be joking. It is a well-known fact that it is difficult to make the spirit of a 9-symphony cauldron submit to one. To make it submit to you in less than a minute? You're dreaming. Not even a Saint Realm expert could do that. You are the one who said those words. With a chuckle, Zhang Xian walked up to the cauldron and slapped it casually. Acknowledge me as your master. Wang. The next moment, a resounding buzz sounded from the cauldron, as if it was shaking in excitement from meeting its master. What? Mo Fei's body trembled uncontrollably, and he nearly spurted blood. That was clearly the sound of the cauldron acknowledging its master, of that there was no mistake. Due to the unique method in forging a 9-symphony cauldron, its spirit was disjointed, making it extremely difficult to win its loyalty. There were many who had spent decades on it, only to fail eventually. Yet, this cauldron actually acknowledged that young man in less than half a minute. Was he truly mistaken once more? The cauldron was a fake as well. Just what was going on? These lilac sandalwood beads can indeed keep one's mind composed when worn, but unfortunately, it is cursed. As a result, not only will it not keep one calm, it might even cause one to go berserk. In your analysis, you said that this bottle of medicinal solution is made using dozens of different poisons, and it is extremely useful for tempering one's body. However, I have just taken a look, and the poison within hasn't been neutralized yet. Anyone who consumes it will die without fail. You claim that this ore can raise the grade of a weapon up a notch by fusing it in. However, it is impossible to melt this ore in the first place, so how could one possibly combine it within a weapon? This. After proving the issues in the appraisal of the first 3 items, Zhang Xian moved on to point out the problems of the other items the attendant had taken out. He would pick up every single item and pat off the dust on them before explaining what was wrong with them. With every problem he explained, Mo Fei's face would turn a shade darker. By the time Zhang Xian was done pointing out the errors in everything, Mo Fei seemed as if he was already standing on the threshold of insanity. He had the attendants test the other items as well, and some of them he even did it himself, but the conclusions were still the same. He was certain that the items here weren't like that when he was appraising them. Why did all of them change all of a sudden? This was exceptionally so for the weapons he had checked. Not only were the spirits within them difficult to tame, they were aggressive even. If a cultivator were to buy one of them, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't be killed by his sword in his sleep. There are actually so many fakes here. I have always trusted the products of the Spirit Emporium, but to think that they were actually such a dishonest business. How can I still trust them not to lie to me in the future? It seems like I can't buy anything from here anymore. The items may be cheap, but if saving that bit of money could cost my life, I would rather not take that risk. Watching the events unfold, the crowd in the area felt their hearts turning cold. The two main reasons they frequented the Spirit Emporium despite the unlawful means they used to obtain their items were due to the relatively lower prices of their goods and the guarantee on its quality. But even with the relatively lower price, if all they were going to receive was a fake, what was the point? Putting everything aside, if they had bought that bottleneck-surmounting pill, not only would they be cheated of their money, they might even lose their life. Who in their right minds would pay just to have themselves killed? So, this is a fake as well. All in all, everything here is a fake. Zhang Xian glanced at the attendants and Mo Fei calmly and said, all in all, you charged me 237 high-tier spirit stones for these items. Given your refund policy, I believe that you owe me 2,370 high-tier spirit stones. 2,370 high-tier spirit stones. They said earlier that they would pay tenfold the selling price should an item be deemed to be a fake. Now that everything has been proven to be fakes, it is only right for the Spirit Emporium to compensate him. This is insane. Even if the Spirit Emporium were to sell of its assets, it couldn't possibly afford that. Well, who asked them to brag about their refund policy? Not to mention, they even dared to put up so many fake goods on top of that. They had it coming. Hearing the young man's words, everyone leaped in shock. Putting aside the Spirit Emporium, it was questionable whether even the royal family had 2,370 high-tier spirit stones in its treasury. But considering how it was exposed before so many people, if it were to default on its payment, its reputation would be completely ruined. If so, they need not dream of operating in Hongyuan City anymore. Amazing. Sun Chang's eyes were glowing in respect. He had been wondering how the young master would exact his vengeance, but upon seeing this sight, he finally realized how fearsome the young master was. If they had walked into the store and threatened the Spirit Emporium with violence, the Spirit Emporium would have held the moral high ground, and no one could have said anything no matter how the Spirit Emporium dealt with them. However, the young master challenged them through legitimate means, cornering them with the rules they had set for themselves. Let's see how you will deal with that. Even if you go to the Master-Teacher Pavilion to mediate in this matter, it is clear that you are in the wrong. It was impossible for the Spirit Emporium to pay the 2,370 high-tier spirit stones compensation. Even if it could, it would be severely crippled financially. With its reputation in shambles, it would never recover from this blow. With so many fakes in the store, who would dare to buy from them in the future? Who in the world are you? What do you intend to do? It wasn't too difficult to see through all of this. At this point, the attendant was already on the verge of tears. He'd thought that he had finally met his god of fortune, and he was looking forward to a life of extravagance. Who could have known that it was a god of misfortune instead? He might very well lose his job due to this. Who am I? I am just a customer in your store. Don't you think that it's only right for you to pay after trying to sell me so many fakes? Zhang Xian smiled. Chapter 755, Where are my artifacts? The attendant's body trembled. In the many years the Spirit Emporium had existed, there had never been a single person who had reported it for selling fake goods. In just a single day, this man actually dug up so many fake goods from their shelves. He'd thought that the other party was just a profligate scion who had too much money to spare, but he would be a fool if he still couldn't tell that it was an act at this point. That fellow was clearly here to cause trouble. Call the boss here, fast. He's the only one who can resolve this matter at this point. Mo Fei urged. It seemed as if he had aged decades over the last few minutes. As an appraiser, he could tell that there was no mistake in the other party's appraisals. At this point, it was already an established fact at this point that they did attempt to defraud their buyers. In other words, as long as the other party demanded compensation, there was nothing they could do about it. The problem was already beyond their scope. Yes. The attendant nodded and quickly rushed off. Soon, a cold-faced middle-aged man strode into the room. He was extremely tall with a slightly plump stature. The sharp glint in his eyes seemed to suggest that he was a person who would resort to unscrupulous means to get what he wanted. His aura was obscure, but it felt transcendent. Most likely, he was at least a nascent saint. Indeed, if not for the backing of such an expert, considering the vile deeds that the Spirit Emporium committed in the shadows, it would have long been rooted from Hongyuan City. The middle-aged man walked up to Zhang Xian and asked with narrowed eyes, "Are you the one who said that these items are fakes?" On the way here, he had already heard the full story from the attendant. Ignoring the other party's words, Zhang Xian waved his hands and said, "Hurry up and decide on how you will compensate me. Otherwise, trust me when I say that it won't take long for the entire Hongyuan City to learn about this." You. Clenching his fists tightly, the hint of killing intent flashed across the dark eyes of the Spirit Emporium's boss. All along, they had been the ones preying on others. To think that a day would come when someone would be so arrogant as to try to prey on them. The boss of the Spirit Emporium harumphed. "This friend over here, I don't know who you are or where you come from, but allow me give you a word of advice, don't burn your bridges. Otherwise, who knows when it might come back to bite you." "Are you threatening me?" Zhang Xian chuckled lightly in response. "A refund tenfold of the selling price, that is the policy your Spirit Emporium came up by yourself. Are you going to silence me now that a fake has really appeared in your store? This isn't a threat, just a friendly reminder to you. The path of a cultivator isn't an easy one, I fear for your safety." Seeing the other party's fearless attitude, the boss of the Spirit Emporium was on the verge of exploding, but there was nothing he could do. If he were to make a move on the other party here, the reputation of their Spirit Emporium which he had built painstakingly over the years would be truly ruined. The boss glanced at Mo Fei and sent a telepathic message to him. "Are those items really fakes?" "I am not too sure either, but, when I reappraised the items he picked out, they were completely different from before. Even if I say that they aren't fakes, no one will believe me," Mo Fei said. Even if they weren't fakes, the other party had already pointed out the various flaws in them clearly. As such, who would still want to buy them? Take for example the valuable Spirit high-tier armor which allowed its wearer to withstand attacks from a transcendent mortal 9-dan expert amidst the stack of items the other party had picked out. Its effects were incredible, but that fellow had already revealed its flaws and how one could overcome it. If so, what was the point of purchasing the armor? In other words, even if the items were authentic, they were already useless at this point. That would make them as good as fakes. Damn it! Hearing Mo Fei admit to the matter, the face of the boss turned scarily livid. "Are you done with the negotiations yet? If you are, pay up. These items are worth 237 high-tier spirit stones, and with your tenfold refund policy, you owe me a total of 2,370 high-tier spirit stones. Alright, I will give you a little bit of a discount out of the kindness of my heart. 2,000 high-tier spirit stones, and I will drop this matter. Otherwise, for defrauding your customers and attempting to scam a master teacher, I will report this matter to the Master Teacher Pavilion to have them to judge this case." Zhang Xian said calmly. "You are a master teacher?" The boss narrowed his eyes. Typically speaking, as long one didn't commit any atrocities against humanity, the Master Teacher Pavilion would not interfere in most matters. However, if a master teacher was involved in the case, there was a good chance that it would intervene. This was a privilege the Master Teacher Pavilion granted its members. Once the Master Teacher Pavilion intervened in the matter, the various shady things they had done might be pulled to the surface as well, and the entire Spirit Emporium could very well be destroyed due to that. Even though there were quite a few people who knew of the Spirit Emporium's doings in the shadows, they had no evidence, and the Spirit Emporium had made sure to deal with them accordingly, be it bribery or silencing them. However, considering the means of the Master Teacher Pavilion, it wouldn't be too difficult for them to get to the bottom of the matter. "That's right," Zhang Xian replied. After recovering from the shock, a thought flashed across the boss's mind, and he harumphed. Even if you are a master teacher, considering your young age, you should be a student of the Master Teacher Academy, right? Considering how many students there are in the Master Teacher Academy, I doubt that anyone will know if one or two of them go missing. The Master Teacher Academy was a place to nurture budding master teachers, and it was impossible to do so while keeping the students in a safe environment. Thus, it wasn't rare for the academy to dispatch its students on dangerous missions, and deaths weren't infrequent. It's indeed nothing much for a student or two of the academy to disappear, but I'm afraid that School Head Mo of the Beast Tamer School and School Head Zhao of the Blacksmith School will disagree with your words. Chuckling lightly, Zhang Xian flicked his wrist and took out the 2 tokens given to him. Since they were already in his possession, it should be fine for him to make use of their authority. Mo Fei's body shuddered upon seeing the tokens, and he hurriedly sent a telepathic message to the boss. Those are indeed the personal tokens of School Head Mo and School Head Zhao. They are real. School Head Zhao and School Head Mo were part of the 10 great master teachers, and they were famous figures even amongst the many Tier 1 empires. Considering that they had given their personal tokens to the young man standing before them, their relationship was anything but ordinary. They are real. The boss had thought that he was only dealing with an ordinary student, so the matter shouldn't have been too difficult to resolve. But who could have thought that the fellow would carry 2 of the school head's personal tokens on him? Alright, I will give you a tease time to think over your options. If you refuse to pay, I will head to the Master Teacher Pavilion. It just happens that I have quite a close relationship with Pavilion Master Mo, so I believe that he will happily seek justice for me. Zhang Xian said as he stretched his back lazily. Since the Spirit Emporium dared to threaten those around him, it should be prepared to face his wrath. You want to be domineering? Sure, let me crush you with my identity as a master teacher then. Let's see which of us is more domineering. The face of the boss reddened in rage, but he dared not to vent his anger. A tease time. On the other hand, the attendant rushed forward and reported something to him via telepathy. Hearing the attendant's words, the boss heaved a sigh of relief before turning to Zhang Xian. There's no need to wait a tease time, we will pay. For real. The Spirit Emporium is going to pay. But that is 2,000 high-tier spirit stones. Putting aside the Spirit Emporium, is there even so much money in Hongyuan Empire? Seeing the boss of the Spirit Emporium abruptly changing his mind, choosing to pay the sum, everyone was taken aback. Even Zhang Xian himself was a little taken aback by the turn of events. He had prepared a hand in case the other party refused to pay, but never had he imagined that the other party would agree to it instead. You paid a high-tier spirit stone to purchase the bronze gong earlier. Even though you did say that you intended to buy the other items, you haven't paid for them yet. In other words, we have only sold you a single item so far. With our refund policy, we will repay you 10 high-tier spirit stones. The boss waved his hands and instructed, hurry up and bring 10 high-tier spirit stones over. Yes. The attendant hurriedly nodded before leaving the room. Soon, he returned with 10 gleaming high-tier spirit stones in hand and passed them over to Sun Chang. This. Sun Chang was a little dazed, unable to catch up with the happenings. He wasn't certain whether he should accept it or not. While the young master had pointed out many items that he wanted to buy, he hadn't paid for them. All along, he had only passed a high-tier spirit stone to the attendant. Using this loophole, the Spirit Emporium regarded that as the only transaction conducted and refunded him 10 high-tier spirit stones. While that was a substantial sum as well, it was at least a cost the Spirit Emporium could afford to bear. Regardless from which angle one looked at this matter from, the other party's response was also in line with the rules. Young master. Unsure of what to do, Sun Chang turned to Zhang Xian, only to see latter smiling calmly. Are you sure that's how you want to play the game? This master teacher over here, I am not sure what you are trying to say. Our Spirit Emporium prides itself on its honor. Since you paid us a high-tier spirit stone, going by our refund policy, we have already compensated you with 10. Even if you were to bring this up in the Master-Teacher Pavilion, I believe that there is nothing Pavilion Master Emo could say about this. The boss of the Spirit Emporium smiled, but his eyes remained as cold as ever. On the other hand, you, as a master teacher, despite not buying anything at all, attempted to hoodwink us out of 2,000 high-tier spirit stones. Surely this would be bad for your reputation if word were to spread? After hearing from the attendant that the fellow had only paid a single high-tier spirit stone, he immediately thought of a countermeasure. A transaction can only be considered to have occurred when the goods and money have been exchanged. Even if the items we have here are fakes, you haven't paid yet, so they still belong to the Spirit Emporium. Naturally, we don't have to refund you for them. I see. Since that is the case. Zhang Xian glanced at the boss of the Spirit Emporium impassively and said, "You have taken my artifacts and placed them on sale for so long, but you still haven't sold them yet. It shouldn't be too much for me to take them away with me now, right?" Artifacts? When did we take your artifacts and place them on sale? The boss of the Spirit Emporium was momentarily stunned by the ridiculous words spouted by the young man before him. "This is the first time I've met you, when did I take your artifacts? Even if you want to frame me, surely you can do better than that. You are denying it." Zhang Xian shook his head. All artifacts have their own spirit, and it is impossible to win the loyalty of the spirit without spending substantial time with them. This is common knowledge amongst all cultivators, so I believe that you, the boss of the Spirit Emporium, shouldn't be unfamiliar with it either. The boss couldn't understand what the young man was driving at, but he nodded in response. It wasn't easy to make the spirit of an artifact submit to one. There were even a few who were unable to get the spirit of their artifact to acknowledge them as its master even after years of effort. That makes things simple then. Alright, I think I don't have to explain that only my own artifacts will listen to my command, that should be more than obvious to all of us here. With an upright posture reminiscent of a taut spear piercing through the heavens, Zhang Xian abruptly bellowed with a resounding voice, "What are you all waiting for? Pay respect to your master." Voila! As soon as those words were uttered, all of the artifacts in the room flew into the sky and gathered around Zhang Xian. Chapter 756, All Mine. This is the response of artifacts who have acknowledged a cultivator as their master. In the end, all of these artifacts actually belong to him. No wonder he knows them so well. Is he the true owner of the Spirit Emporium? These are the most valuable artifacts here. If all of these are his, this would mean that the Spirit Emporium is pretty much emptied out. Seeing the artifacts flying from their places, everyone was stunned. All of the artifacts which the young man had appraised before, be they swords, chains, armors, cauldrons, each and every one of them was floating around him, humming in excitement. It was as if they had finally met with their master after great difficulty, and they were unwilling to part with him. All of the most valuable artifacts in the Spirit Emporium were in there. If all of those artifacts belonged to the young man before them, this renowned treasure vault of Hongyuan City would be emptied out. Those artifacts made up 70 to 80% of the total asset of the Spirit Emporium. Surely the young man, and not the middle-aged man over there, was the true boss of the Spirit Emporium. Sun Chang's lips twitched. The young master, sure is vicious. He knew of the young master's ability to make artifacts acknowledge him swiftly. Back when he was appraising the artifacts, he'd touched every single one of them while explaining their properties. It was probably then that he'd made them submit to him. From the very start, there were only two options for the Spirit Emporium. They could either obediently pay up or have their assets emptied out. With all the weapons acknowledging the young master, even if he were to claim that everything was stolen from him, there would be no one who would doubt his words. Why you? As expected, upon seeing all of the weapons obeying the words of the young man, the boss of the Spirit Emporium nearly fainted. He'd paid a hefty price in order to procure those weapons, and he was certain that they were unowned when he obtained them. Why did all of them acknowledge that fellow as their master? Gaining the acknowledgement of an artifact was an extremely troublesome matter. Without sufficient time, it was impossible to succeed. For all of them to acknowledge him as their master, it could only mean one thing. In the very first place, all of these weapons belonged to him. He felt fresh blood welling up in his throat, threatening to spill forth at any moment. In order to buy these weapons, the Spirit Emporium had even incurred a heavy debt. If everything were to be taken away by the other party, the business empire which he had built painstakingly over the course of many years would collapse in an instant. Not only so, he would even fall into heavy debt as well. As everyone can see, these artifacts belong to me. However, the Spirit Emporium stole them from me, and left with no choice, I could only resort to such a course of action. All I want now is to bring my artifacts away with me, Zhang Xian said righteously. Those artifacts belong to you, and you want to take them away. Pooh! Reaching the limit of his tolerance, the head of the Spirit Emporium spurted a mouthful of blood. Like heck they are yours, I bought them with a huge sum of money. They are mine. You are clearly a troublemaker wreaking havoc in my territory. I have already given you 10 high-tier spirit stones, what else do you want? Do you really intend to take my entire fortune away with you? How the hell have I offended you that you must push me over the cliff? Since these artifacts are mine, I will be taking them back now. Sun Cheng, let's go. Just as the boss of the Spirit Emporium was overwhelmed with indignation, the young man before him swiftly stored all of the flying artifacts in his storage ring and turned around to leave. You. Hold it right there. Knowing that everything would be over if he allowed the young man to leave, the head of the Spirit Emporium roared furiously. The aura of a saint surged from his body, ready to unleash a fatal strike on the young man before him at any moment. Zhang Xian turned around and faced the boss fearlessly. Why? Are you going to resort to violence now? You should know the consequences of snatching a master teacher's possession. If the Master Teacher Pavilion were to learn that the boss of the Spirit Emporium had stolen a Master Teacher's possession before so many people, he would be severely dealt with. Even if he was a saint, he could potentially stand to have his cultivation crippled or even face death. A savage expression surfaced on the boss of the Spirit Emporium. I won't snatch the artifacts through violence, but unless you hand them over, don't even dream about stepping out of this building. Men. Voila! The patrol squads swiftly rushed forward and blocked all of the exits. Wielding a weapon each in their hands, they glared at Zhang Xian ferociously, as if they would tear him apart if he dared approach them. On the other hand, the crowd in the area who were dragged into this matter turned pale in fright, and their bodies trembled uncontrollably. If they had known this would happen, they would never have stayed on to watch the commotion. Now, they were doomed. To think that the boss of the Spirit Emporium would be so underhanded as to bully a junior. Despite the impending battle that was about to fall upon him, Zhang Xian didn't seem panicked in the least. Instead, he sighed deeply. To tell you the truth, I was still contemplating whether I should give you a chance and leave some of the artifacts behind. However, since you are so shameless, don't blame me for getting nasty then. Disappointment was reflected in Zhang Xian's eyes. Shaking his head, he walked calmly over to the shelves, opened the casing, and tapped on the metal hammer within it twice. This is mine. Following which, he walked over to another artifact and tapped on it as well. This is mine too. Mine as well. Still mine. All mine. Soon, he tapped the 8 remaining items in the room. The boss of the Spirit Emporium was still wondering what that fellow was up to when all of the artifacts suddenly hummed excitedly, acknowledging Zhang Xian as their master. Every single one of them flew into the air and floated right by the young man's side. The heck? The boss was on the verge of insanity. That fellow was not planning to take away most of the Spirit Emporium's asset, he was planning on taking away all of its assets. If the other party was allowed to do as he pleased, everything in the Spirit Emporium would be his in less than 5 minutes. Screw him. Stop him, the boss bellowed. Hong Long. Hearing the boss's command, the guards rushed at Zhang Xian to stop him, but the next instant, countless artifacts abruptly appeared and struck them. The artifacts were protecting their master. If those guards wanted to get to Zhang Xian, they would have to get past the artifacts first. Even though the offensive capabilities of the artifacts weren't too strong as there was no one driving them, they still managed to stall the guards. These artifacts were the possessions of the Spirit Emporium, so they didn't dare to strike too hard for fear of damaging any of them. Boss! The head of the guards called out. All of you, scram! Reaching the limits of his tolerance, the boss roared. The power of a saint burst from his body, and under the suppression of the violent aura, the floating artifacts fell to the ground powerless with a jolt. Clang 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 clang. What are you doing? You know that you have to pay for damaging my artifacts, right? Zhang Xian frowned. Pay? Pay your head. Bursting with fury, the boss could maintain his composure no longer and began hurling curses. All of those items were my precious artifacts, but you used some kind of sorcery to make them submit to you. You were the one who stole my treasures, and you still want me to pay you? How can there be such a shameless person in the world? Today, you need not try to leave. The more he thought about it, the more furious he felt. Thus, he stomped his feet. Hong Long. The Spirit Emporium began to tremor, and all of the doors slammed shut. Two towering walls rose from the ground, covering all of the shelves where the artifacts were supposed to be placed. It's a mechanism. I have long heard that the boss of the Spirit Emporium paid a heavy price in order to build this building, inviting 40 students of the Celestial Designer School to work day and night for half a year to rush this out. I thought that those were just rumors, but it was actually true. Now that the Spirit Emporium has been locked down, how are we supposed to leave? I have no idea either. Let's just hope that we won't be implicated in this matter. I doubt so. That young man is a master teacher, so if the boss were to kill him, we would be eyewitnesses to the deed. Seeing the boss fly into a rage and activate the mechanism of the Spirit Emporium to shut all of the exits, preventing anyone from entering or leaving, the crowd that was trapped inside stared at one another with faces pale with fright. If the boss were to really kill that master teacher, they, as eyewitnesses, surely wouldn't fare any better either. After all, if the matter were to be leaked to the Master Teacher Pavilion, the boss would be pursued by them to the ends of the world. Standing beside Zhang Xian, Sun Chang's face paled as well. The young master's cultivation was only at the Cosmos Bridge realm, but the enemy he was facing was a saint. This time, they were really in deep trouble. Zhang Xian had never told anyone about the otherworldly demon puppets or vicious, so Sun Chang was unaware of their existence as well. So, are you intending on killing a master teacher? Seeing the other party activating the lockdown function of the Spirit Emporium, Zhang Xian turned to the boss and frowned. Gritting his teeth in rage, the boss sneered. Kill a master teacher? How could I dare to do so? However, if you don't hand over my possessions this instant, I fear that I might not be able to hold myself back. Your possessions? These artifacts addressed me as their master and protected me. Are your eyes too blind to see that? On the contrary, my possessions have brought your store prestige and class, so the least you can do is pay me the rental fee, right? Zhang Xian replied nonchalantly. The boss staggered upon hearing those words. He felt as if he might just die of anger if he were to continue speaking. If that fellow pay you the rental fee. You stole my possessions, and you still want me to pay you? Do you take me for a fool? Hung Long Long. An immense accumulation of jinqi gathered in the boss's palm, as if of the materialization of his rage. I will give you one last warning. Return those items to me, and I can consider sparing you. I won't say this again, he threatened menacingly. Were it not for his fear of school head Mo and school head Zhao, he would have long made a move. Even so, his overwhelming rage was threatening to remove all reason from him, compelling him to make a move. Seeing the mass of Jinqi in the other party's hands threatening to rip him to pieces any moment now, Zhang Xian shook his head. Warning. I have seen plenty of bandits in my life, but I have never seen one who steals as brazenly as you do. You are truly incredible. Since that is the case, allow me to let you in on a secret then. He abruptly leaped several dozen meters forward and stepped heavily on the ground before leaping in another direction. He continued another 7 times before returning back to his original position. A secret? What are you up to? Seeing that the fellow was up to something once more, the boss glared at him warily. On the other hand, Zhang Xian smiled brightly and said, the fact is, this spirit emporium is mine as well. Kacha. Kacha. A series of mechanisms abruptly spun into action, and the entire spirit emporium began to shake in euphoria. What? The spirit emporium has acknowledged him as its master as well? The boss felt as if the entire world had gone mad. Chapter 757, Taming the Boss, Spirit Euphoria. The Spirit Emporium has acknowledged him as its master. What in the world happened? How did that fellow do it? The crowd trapped in the room were shocked speechless. At this moment, they finally realized the queerness of the young man before them. With just a few pats here and there, all of the artifacts acknowledged him as their master. With just a few steps, even the Spirit Emporium submitted to him. Was there anything in the world he couldn't tame? It was no wonder the boss of the Spirit Emporium was so furious. If they were to see their own possessions being claimed by others in such a manner, they would have gone on a rampage as well. Young master. Sun Chang's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. He'd thought that when the young master said that he would cause trouble, he would only force the other party to compensate for the assault. But from the looks of it, that wasn't just it. He was planning to overturn the other party's entirety. This was too vicious. Even though the old master was also rather extreme as well, he would at least hold back considering his position as a master teacher. On the other hand, it was as if the young master was completely out of control. However, no matter what, the other party was a saint. He might be able to hold back for a moment in consideration of the young master's standing as a master teacher, but under such relentless provocation, his tolerance would swiftly wear thin. By then, there would be no one but the old master who could save them. I want you dead. As if Sun Chang's worst fears had come to be, the boss of the Spirit Emporium roared furiously, and raising his palm, the formidable might of a Saint Realm expert came crashing toward his young master. Young master. Alarmed, Sun Chang was just about to rush up to take the blow for the young master when the latter abruptly raised his palm. Barrier. With those words, dozens of artifacts flew up and stood in front of Zhang Xian, protecting him from the blow. At the same time, the ground rumbled as the whirring of mechanisms echoed in the air. Several towering walls rose from the ground, sealing both Zhang Xian and the boss within it. Young master. Seeing that Zhang Xian was locked together with a rampaging Saint Realm expert in a narrow space, Sun Chang immediately rushed forward anxiously. To his shock, however, he realized that the walls blocking him were made of an incredibly resilient material which he couldn't break with his current strength. How could I have allowed this happen? If a mishap befalls the young master, how can I ever face the old master? Sun Chang cried as he punched the walls desperately. Before meeting the old master, he had been nothing more than a humble merchant, destined to spend his entire life in a daze in Tianxian Kingdom, never venturing out to see the wider world beyond. It was the old master who brought him out from the well he was in, granting his great responsibility despite his humble birth, and helped to raise his cultivation. The old master had entrusted the young master to his care. If something were to happen to the young master, he would be a sinner. Young master, nothing can happen to you. With a trembling body, Sun Chang fumbled around the wall, attempting to find any point of weaknesses on the wall which he could exploit. However, the wall was built of materials far beyond his current strength. No matter how hard he tried, he was powerless before it. Peng 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 peng. At that moment, the sound of fists and legs sinking into flesh echoed from within the walls. The young master is getting beaten up. Those sounds sent Sun Chang into utter panic. His eyes reddened in anxiety, and his heart pounded in apprehension. No, I must save the young master, even at the cost of my life. He didn't know what else he could at the moment, so he could only try ramming at the wall with his body. However, at that moment, a scream of agony sounded. "Oh! Stop hitting me. I admit that I'm at fault, I beg you to let me off." Hearing that voice, the fidgety Sun Chang suddenly froze on the spot. That voice didn't come from the young master but the boss of the Spirit Emporium. The boss was begging for mercy. Could it be that the young master was pummeling the Saint Realm boss within the walls? Flabbergasted, Sun Chang stared at the walls before him with his mouth agape. Returning back to the time when the boss of the Spirit Emporium made a move on Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian knew that even with the artifacts protecting him, he wouldn't last long against the boss. Thus, he immediately activated the mechanism of the Spirit Emporium and summoned the walls beneath the ground to seclude themselves from the world outside. This way, he would be able to do anything he wished without worrying about prying eyes. Hoo. As soon as those walls were in place, Zhang Xian flicked his wrist and whipped out a book and 20 otherworldly demon puppets. "Get him!" Zhang Xian ordered. With the experience from pummeling the Byzantium Helios beast, those puppets rushed at the boss and began beating him viciously from head to toe. All along, the boss had thought that he was only dealing with a Cosmos Bridge Realm lad, so there was nothing for him to worry about. Who would have thought the other party would suddenly summon so many Saint Realm experts? Before he could even process what was going on, heavy blows were raining down him, leaving him with heavy bruises and swelling everywhere. After enduring the heavy beatings for a few moments, he finally found an opening for him to escape. But just as he was about to move, an overwhelming killing intent crushed down on him, rendering him immobile. As such, he could only continue to suffer the beating. His current cultivation was only at Saint Realm primary stage, a far way off from matching up to the Byzantium Helios beast. Given how even the latter was done in, how could he possibly withstand the onslaught of the otherworldly demon puppets? In just a few moments, he was already utterly subdued. While the Spirit Emporium was important, how could it compare to his life? Considering that the other party could retain his composure before his wrath, it was likely that he wasn't some kind soul either. If he didn't beg for mercy, chances were that the other party might just watch nonchalantly as he was beaten to death. Left with no choice, he could only plead for his life. "You want me to spare you? Offer your soul to me and acknowledge me as your master." Zhang Xian replied indifferently to his pleading. Zhang Xian did consider whether he should just kill the boss of the Spirit Emporium, but the death of a saint would likely result in a huge storm in the city. That could mean a great deal of trouble for him. However, he couldn't simply let the other party off either, especially after all that had happened. Thus, after some contemplation, he decided to force the other party into submission instead. As long as he could hold the other party's soul captive, he wouldn't need to worry about the other party divulging his secret. At the same time, he would gain a Saint Realm lackey as well, which would give him more room to deal with matters without resorting to the otherworldly demon puppets. The otherworldly demon puppets were his trump card, but they were a double-edged sword as well. Anything related to the otherworldly demonic tribe was sensitive, and he might be branded as a traitor of humanity if he were to be spotted with the puppets. Thus, it would be best for him to limit his usage of them. "You want me to offer my soul to you?" The boss was taken aback. In a sense, this was similar to the contract between a beast tamer and their tamed beast. However, establishing a contract between humans wasn't as simple a procedure. One had to have a profound understanding of souls in order to do so. Of all the occupations, the only one known to be capable of such a feat was the Soul Oracle. If that fellow was asking this of him, did it mean that he was a Soul Oracle? But hadn't that occupation gone extinct yet? Seeing the hesitation in the boss's eyes, Zhang Xian impatiently commanded, "Continue beating him, do not stop until he's dead." "Wait a moment." The boss of the Spirit Emporium waved his hands in a fluster as the puppets in the area marched ferociously toward him once more. As long as he could continue living, he wouldn't hesitate to acknowledge another man as his master. He had once committed banditry, and ironically, the experience ended up teaching him how valuable life was. Before it, dignity and pride were mere transient qualities. "I'll acknowledge you as my master," the boss said, knowing that it was either this or death. He severed a portion of his soul, and a powerful force abruptly pulled it into the glabella of the young man before him. As a Saint Realm expert, he had already gained a certain degree of control over his soul, allowing him to sever a portion of it easily. Formidable. As soon as that fragment of his soul seeped into the other party's glabella, he saw an immense soul reminiscent of a giant towering before it. The boss's face paled in fright. He was a Saint Realm expert, but the other party's soul was innumerable times larger and stronger than his. In terms of the strength of their souls, he was no match for the young man before him at all. It was as if pitting an undeveloped child against a behemoth. Could it be that he is really a soul oracle? But even soul oracles wouldn't have such a powerful soul. The boss's body trembled in astonishment. Even though he had never met a soul oracle before, he had once read a few records on them. While soul oracles did specialize in soul cultivation, it wasn't to such an exaggerated extent. The soul he was seeing before him shattered what he had thought to be possible for a soul. Just how in the world did the other party cultivate his soul? And where did this freak come from? Who? While the boss was immersed in his shock, the fragment of his soul was fused into the other party's soul. With this, as long as the young man before him willed it, he would die instantaneously. Not daring to show the slightest disrespect for the young man, he hurriedly clasped his fist and bowed respectfully. "Master." "Good, call me young master." Zhang Xian nodded. After the affair with Imo Hunsheng, Zhang Xian had some experience with establishing a contract with other humans, so it went much smoother this time. "Yes, young master," the boss replied politely. Knowing that the other party was no longer able to stand against him, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He returned Vicious and the other otherworldly demon puppets into his ring before turning to the boss and asking, "What is your name?" Since the other party was his subordinate now, he should at least know the other party's name. After all, he couldn't possibly keep addressing the other party as boss. "I am Wei Changfeng One," the boss replied. "Braving through the wind and waves. You have a good name." "All right, I'll call you Little Feng too then." Zhang Xian nodded. "Yes." Wei Changfeng nodded hurriedly. "Keep everything that has happened in here a secret. Not a soul is to learn of it," Zhang Xian instructed. "Don't worry, young master. I won't speak a word of it to anyone," Wei Changfeng replied. For a Cosmos Bridge Realm cultivator to command 20 Saint Realm puppets, no one would believe his words even if he were to divulge it. After ensuring that the other party wouldn't divulge the matter, Zhang Xian nodded in satisfaction. Following which, he asked, "Do you know why I came to your Spirit Emporium to cause trouble?" "Forgive me for my ignorance, but I am unaware of the reason," Wei Changfeng replied with a sliver of doubt in his tone. "The reason is simple. Your Spirit Emporium, out of greed, attempted to lay its hands on my students and butler. These men are your subordinates, right?" With a casual grasp, the roof of the Spirit Emporium opened up, and the great violet-winged beast flew in and tossed 4 semi-dead fellows in. Upon seeing the faces of the 4 men, Wei Changfeng's face twitched as he replied, "Yes. I'll leave it to you to deal with them." Zhang Xian waved his hands. "Also, I want you to clear whatever work you have the Spirit Emporium as soon as possible and come work for me. Don't worry, as long as you do well, I will guide you in your cultivation and bring you to greater heights." "Yes." Wei Changfeng nodded in response. As a servant, he could only take whatever his master said at face value. He didn't have the right to refuse the other party. In truth, he didn't really believe that Zhang Xian would be able to raise his cultivation. After all, as a Cosmos Bridge Realm cultivator, how could the other party have the knowledge and experience to guide him, a Saint Realm cultivator, in his cultivation? That was a huge joke. You don't believe me? Seeing through Wei Changfeng's thoughts, Zhang Xian smiled. I dare not to. Wei Changfeng swiftly replied. If I am not mistaken, the reason you started the Spirit Emporium and stole the artifacts of others is all to save a person, right? Zhang Xian asked impassively. How did you know? Wei Changfeng's eyes widened in astonishment. Chapter 758, Returning to the academy. When Wei Changfeng had executed a battle technique against him, Zhang Xian had already compiled a book on him via the Library of Heaven's Path. Initially, he harbored great disdain for the other party for the vile deeds he had done, but after learning of the reason behind his actions, he couldn't help but feel a little pity for him. It wasn't that Wei Changfeng was a person with insatiable greed, but that he needed those to save a life. Regardless of how I know, I can tell you this. As long as you serve me well, I will help you save her. Even if it is beyond my means, I will do my best to find someone who possesses the ability to do so. Zhang Xian said. Why you? Wei Changfeng's body trembled. The other party was right. The reason he had opened the Spirit Emporium and gathered all kinds of artifacts in it despite risking making a lot of enemies was also to treat his severely ill daughter. His daughter's vitals had been wounded when she was still a fetus, resulting in her innate frailty from birth. He had sought many famous physicians, but there were none who could offer him a solution. In the end, it was a 6-star pinnacle physician who had given him a prescription and told him that he could lengthen the lifespan of his daughter by feeding her the spirit contained within artifacts. It was through this matter that his daughter had lasted the past few years. However, this only alleviated her condition temporarily, and its effectiveness was wearing thin. If a cure couldn't be found soon, she wouldn't have long to live. However, this issue was only known amongst the saints in Hongyuan City. How did he learn of it? If the young master can really save my daughter, I will do anything to repay the favor, even if it means braving through hell. Recalling the various incredible means of the young man before him, Wei Changfeng couldn't help but have his hopes lifted. He immediately kneeled to the floor and bowed. I don't need you to brave through hell for me. As long as you serve me well, you will be well rewarded. Zhang Xian said as he took out a wine gourd and passed it over. Drink it. Yes. Even though Wei Changfeng was surprised by the abrupt gesture, he didn't dare to disobey the other party's words. Thus, he pried open the lid and gulped down the wine. Gu-gu-gu-gu. As the fine wine entered his body, he immediately felt a warm surge of energy flowing through his veins. At a pace visible to the eye, the injuries he had sustained from the puppets healed, and before long, he had already made a full recovery. This is Saint Recovery Medicine. Wei Changfeng narrowed his eyes. Despite being a Saint Realm expert and the head of the Spirit Emporium, he had never seen a Saint Recovery Medicine with effects as pronounced as this. For his wounds to heal immediately after drinking it. Perhaps, the young master might just be able to save his daughter's life. Let's clear up this mess first. Zhang Xian said. If he wanted to win the absolute loyalty of his subordinates, he would have to strike a balance between the carrot and stick. After forcing the other party in submission, it was only right to give him some benefits so as to give him some expectations for the future. Otherwise, even if Zhang Xian held his soul hostage, if the other party's heart wasn't with him, that would be no different from carrying a ticking time bomb around with him. Yes. Knowing that it was impossible for the young master to save his daughter considering that he had yet to achieve anything for the other party, Wei Changfeng didn't pursue the matter. Jia. The mechanisms rumbled, the wall isolating the duo slowly vanished, and Sun Chang and the others came into sight. Boss. The guards rushed forward anxiously, but upon seeing that Zhang Xian was still alive and kicking, the guards encircled him and drew their weapons. Insolent! Wei Changfeng leaped in fright upon seeing that sight. From today onward, he shall be my young master, so you must address him as young master as well. You must treat him with even more respect with me, and anyone who defies this order will be killed. There will be no chances given. Young master. The guards were taken aback. Did the boss hit his head somewhere? The other party had just wreaked havoc in his territory, and he was ordering them to address the culprit as young master. But despite their bewilderment, they knew that the boss wasn't kidding given the grim expression on his face. Thus, they lowered their heads and clasped their fists, paying respect to the young master. The cultivators watching the spectacle from the side were stunned speechless. They'd thought that it was incredible of that young man to make all of those artifacts and even the Spirit Emporium acknowledge him as their master. But to think that he would even tame the Saint Realm boss of the Spirit Emporium. Could there be anything more exaggerated than this? Young master. Sun Chang's lips twitched. He was still worried that some mishap would befall on the young master. But from the looks of it now, his worries were unfounded. To tame a Saint Realm cultivator despite being at Cosmos Bridge Realm, the young master was just a step away from shattering the atmosphere. As expected of the old master's student, he does have the old master's flair in him. Sun Chang remarked in awe. After organizing the guards, Wei Changfeng turned to the crowd and clasped his fist. Everyone, I ask of you not to speak a word of what happened here today outside. You will have my gratitude for that. Even though these men hadn't seen the battle for themselves, it did seem that the young master intended to keep a low profile, so it would be ideal for him to limit any rumors as far as he could. In any case, the young master hadn't revealed his name at any point, so these men would be unlikely to point him out anyway. Don't worry, boss. Our lips are sealed. Confidentiality has always been my strong suit. The cultivators hurriedly nodded. Considering that a master teacher and the boss of the Spirit Emporium were involved in this conflict, they would not dare gossip about it for fear of losing their heads. And more importantly, even if they were to talk about the affairs that had happened today, others would simply take them as lunatics. After all, they wouldn't have believed such a thing to be possible either if they hadn't witnessed it themselves. Hearing the voices of agreement, Wei Changfeng turned to the attendants and instructed, Men, give these guests a gift package each as compensation for the trauma they have suffered from this incident. To be able to build a business empire from scratch and sustain it for so many years in Hongyuan Empire wasn't an easy feat. Wei Changfeng was also quite a capable person himself. With a suitable use of threat and reward, those men should understand that it wouldn't be to their advantage to talk. Good. Seeing how Xiao Feng dealt with the incident promptly, Zhang Xian nodded in commendation. In truth, the Spirit Emporium didn't have as many fakes as he'd claimed. Most of it was due to his framing. Even though the appraiser did exaggerate about the grade 6 pill, it wasn't so extreme that it could be considered poison. In truth, the so-called poison was a surge of jinqi which he slipped into the pill while holding the jade box. After learning the Heaven's Path poison art, he could turn his Heaven's Path jinqi into lethal poison on a whim. With that, poisoning a sample pill beast to death was not a difficult feat at all. If someone had realized what was going on and waited for a moment longer with the pill, the jinqi he had hidden inside would have dissipated and lost its effect. As for the bronze gong, as a soul oracle, it was exceedingly easy for him to nullify its soul attack. Most of the subsequent fakes that he had pointed out were also tampered by him one way in another. He had identified their flaws via the Library of Heaven's Path and framed his cases accordingly. As easy as that, everything in the room had soon turned into a fake. As for the acknowledgement by the artifacts, just as Sun Chang had thought, Zhang Xian had already made them submit to him while introducing the various fakes to the crowd. If the other party had chosen to compensate him, he would have left without doing anything. Otherwise, he'd planned to tear apart the other party's nest with their own artifacts. Let's return. Since Wei Changfeng had sent his men after Sun Chang, it was natural that he would know where their residence was. With his soul shackled, he would surely come to them after finishing up whatever he had to do at the Spirit Emporium. With his goal achieved, there was no need for Zhang Xian to remain in the Spirit Emporium any longer. Thus, he and Sun Chang leaped onto the back of the great violet-winged beast and soared into the sky, disappearing from everyone's sight. Back at the residence. Young master, these are the high-tier spirit stones that the boss of the Spirit Emporium gave us earlier on. Sun Chang passed over the 10 high-tier spirit stones which he had taken from Wei Changfeng earlier on. All right. Grabbing hold of them, Zhang Xian nodded in satisfaction. After which, he instructed, you need not worry about money any longer. Go ahead and find a larger residence for us. With the boss of the Spirit Emporium as his subordinate, money was no longer an issue to them. Naturally, it was about time for them to find a more fitting residence. Honestly speaking, this place was a little too small for his liking. There wasn't even enough space for him to interrogate the Byzantium Helios beast. Yes. Sun Chang nodded. For the time being, you all won't require high-tier spirit stones for your cultivation. Here are some artifacts and pills, deal with them as you deem fit. If it is of any use to your cultivation, go ahead and use it. Flicking his wrist, Zhang Xian took out the various items which he had taken from the Spirit Emporium earlier. Sun Chang stored the items in his storage ring and nodded. With these items, Zheng Yang and the others would be able to advance their cultivation by leaps and bounds. Sun Chang suddenly recalled a matter and reported, Young master, when I was out earlier today, I saw a residence that fits our criteria. Not only is it in close proximity to the Master Teacher Academy, it also has all of the amenities we require. However, it seemed like someone has just purchased it. It can't be helped if someone has already taken it. Hengyuan City is very big, it shouldn't be too difficult for us to find another larger residence, Zhang Xian replied. Since the residence was only purchased recently, it was unlikely that the owner would be willing to sell it for the time being. Since that was the case, they might have better luck searching for another residence in the city. Besides, they weren't in a rush either. All right. I will be in the Master Teacher Academy the next few days. If there is anything urgent, contact me through the Great Violet Wing Beast. If that fails, go ahead and liaise with Xiao Feng. Zhang Xian instructed. After Zhang Xian was done with the arrangements, he leaped onto the back of the Great Violet Wing Beast and flew for the academy. With this matter resolved, it was about time for him to head to the Terpsichore School and Demonic Tunist School to browse through their books. He had to deal with the innate fetal poison in his soul as soon as possible so as to avoid any unexpected circumstances. Zhang Xian had the Great Violet Wing Beast land at the elite sector before sending it back to Sun Chang's side. Just as he was about to ask around where the Demonic Tunist School and Terpsichore School were, he suddenly heard knocking on his door. Opening his door, he saw Ruohuan Gongzi, Luo Xian, Song Chao, and a few others standing at the doorway. After the entrance examination, they had been settled into their dormitories by Bai Shi and the other seniors. Upon hearing that Zhang Shi had taken up a residence in the elite sector, they came over to pay their greetings. After trading a few pleasantries, Ruohuan Gongzi dived into the main topic at hand and asked, Brother Zhang, there is an event for students to find their teachers today. Are you going to participate in it? I will pass. Zhang Xian shook his head. He had no intentions of finding a teacher. With the Library of Heaven's Path, all he needed was an ample number of books. Actually, the reason we came to look for you today is to seek Brother Zhang's opinion on which teacher we should acknowledge in the academy. Ruohuan Gongzi said sheepishly. In terms of age, he and Luo Xian could be considered as Zhang Xian's senior. However, in the master-teacher continent, seniority was determined by one's capability. In a sense, addressing Zhang Xian as a fellow peer could be considered as a sign of respect to him. I am not too familiar with the teachers of the academy. Zhang Xian shook his head. How could he know which teacher would be the best in the academy? He wasn't going to seek a teacher in the first place. You aren't familiar with the teachers of the academy? How can that be? We have already heard the rumors, and it seemed like you even rejected school head Mo's offer to become his direct disciple. Luo Xian exclaimed in disbelief. Zhang Shi had performed outstandingly in the entrance examination, winning over school head Mo's admiration. As such, the latter had offered to take the other in as his direct disciple, only to be flatly rejected. This matter had already spread like wildfire across the entire academy. Since you rejected even school head Mo's offer, doesn't that mean that you have a better candidate in mind? I haven't thought that far yet. Speaking of which, since you are here, does it mean that you already have a person in mind? Why don't you tell me? I will help you ask around. Zhang Xian smiled. Since they were asking for his opinion, they must have already taken a look around and had a candidate in mind, just that they were still feeling a little uncertain about their choices. Most freshmen lacked connections with the seniors to inquire about the various teachers in the academy. However, Zhang Xian was acquainted with Luo Qiqi and Yu Feier, as well as several school heads in the academy. If those didn't work, he could also ask the students in the elite sector, surely at least one of them would be willing to share some insights. Even though it had only been 2 days since Zhang Xian had cleared the entrance examination, he had already forged several connections which allowed him to maneuver around the academy easily. Chapter 759, Ashen Moon Faction. The teachers of the 10 schools will be conducting a public lecture each on the impartation podium later today. We hope that Brother Zhang can attend it with us. Your eyes are far more discerning than ours, so we trust your judgment more, Ruohuan Gongzi said awkwardly. After suffering multiple blows while competing with the man before him, he knew better than anyone else that the other party was a man of incredible capability. If the other party could help him find a teacher, it would definitely be far better than him fumbling around and trying his luck. There were only 3 days for students to find a teacher. Their future was at stake here. They could soar to great heights with a good teacher, but if they were to make a mistake with this, they could potentially end up capping their future accomplishments instead. Eventually, they decided that it would be best for them to consult Zhang Xian on this matter. They had all come from the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, so they were familiar with one another. Even when compared to Hong Shi and the others, Zhang Shi's judgment was still far more precise and accurate. Impartation podium. Public lecture. Zhang Xian was taken aback. Too overwhelmed by challenging the blacksmith examination, he hadn't had the time to learn what was going on in the academy yet. The impartation podium stood at the very center of the academy, and it was usually the venue for most major events. At the same time, it also served as a dueling platform for students to resolve their differences. As for public lectures, he had heard of them back when he was still a teacher in Hongtian Academy. To put it simply, it was a lesson which anyone could attend if they wanted. The public lectures served as a platform for students to assess a teacher's capability so that they could better choose their teachers. At the same time, it also introduced a fair degree of rivalry among the teaching staff, encouraging them to work harder and strive for excellence in their teaching. Yes, does Zhang Shi want to head over as well? Everyone turned to look at Zhang Xian. Seeing the determined expressions on their faces, it was clear that they wouldn't give up easily on this matter. After all, it was extremely easy for one to be overwhelmed by the sheer number of master teachers conducting public lectures there. This choice could potentially determine how far they would rise as a master teacher, so they weren't willing to take it lightly. After a moment of contemplation, Zhang Xian nodded. All right, I will go with you all then. This will be a good opportunity to see the standard of the teachers in the academy. Since most of the teachers were participating in this event, it was unlikely that there would be any people at the Terpsichorus school or Demonic Tunist school, making it difficult for him to find the books he sought. Thus, he might as well make use of the time to take a peek at the quality of lessons in Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy so that he could have a rough gauge of where he stood. With Zhang Xian having made up his mind, the group headed left for the impartation podium. It was some distance away from the elite sector, but with their current cultivation, it didn't take too long for them to arrive at their destination. There was only one word that could be used to describe the venue: congested. All 30,000 freshmen were currently standing atop the impartation podium, in search of a suitable teacher for them. There were also a couple of seniors who had decided to join in the bustle as well. Despite the immense size of the podium, it was completely packed with men. One would have easily gotten lost if it had been their first time here. Ruohuan Gongzi had looked into the event beforehand, so he began introducing the various technicalities regarding it. In order to better facilitate the freshmen around the various public lectures held by the teachers, they have divided the impartation podium in a manner such that there's a narrow passageway for movement, and as long as one walks along the passageway, they will be able to listen to the lectures held by all of the teachers. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian glanced at the crowd ahead of him, and indeed, he could see that most people were heading in the same direction, which was likely where the passageway Ruohuan Gongzi mentioned was. Standing on elevated platforms on both sides of the passageway were teachers who were busy lecturing the crowd gathered around them. Being too far away, the group wasn't able to hear the content of the lectures. Nevertheless, they could see the intoxicated looks of the students listening to the lectures, seemingly fully immersed in the lecturer's words. Nearly all of the teachers in the Master Teacher Academy were 6-star master teachers, and at such a level, how could their ability to impart knowledge possibly be lacking? No matter how boring their lessons might be, their deep understanding of cultivation easily made up for it. Their words carried a kind of strength that drew people in, leaving the listeners deeply entranced by the brand new world open to them. Juniors, may I interest you in the teacher information documentation? Just as the group was about to follow the crowd into the passageway, a smiling young man suddenly walked up to them and blocked their way. The young man seemed to be in his 30s, possessing a lanky figure reminiscent of a bamboo. A 5-star emblem stood on his chest, which showed that he was at least a grade 2 student in the academy. Teacher information documentation. Zhang Xian frowned. The young man glanced in the surroundings, and after ensuring that no one was looking, he whipped out a book and passed it over while whispering in a hushed voice, "Yes. Our Ashen Moon faction has specially compiled all of the information regarding the teachers in the academy, as well as their various unique characteristics, interests, and the results of their students. Using this as a reference as you listen to the various public lectures, you will be able to make a better choice." There is such a thing. Bewildered, Zhang Xian took the book, and just as he was about to flip it open, the young man before abruptly stopped him. Every single one of us in the Master Teacher Academy possesses a photographic memory. If I allow you to browse through the book, how am I supposed to sell it? If you wish to look at it, you will have to buy it. Anyone with a soul depth beyond 10 would possess a photographic memory. Considering that the minimum requirement to enter the academy was for one to be a 4-star master teacher, it meant that every single student had a photographic memory. The teacher information documentation contained extremely precious information, and the other party was clearly intending on using it to earn some additional money. If he were to allow his customers to browse through it and memorize its contents, who would bother buying the book? How much does it cost? Ruohuan Gongzi asked. Since this document had been prepared by the seniors, it should be accurate. If they could buy a copy, it would help facilitate them in choosing which teacher to acknowledge. Our Ashen Moon faction spent great effort to gather and compile the information, so we have to charge a higher price in order to recoup our losses. Each copy costs 100 middle-tier spirit stones, and the price isn't up for negotiation. The young man said. 100 middle-tier spirit stones? Everyone was shocked. Coming from the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, Ruohuan Gongzi had barely seen any middle-tier spirit stones in his life. Luo Xian, who had come from the strongest sect in the region, fared slightly better in his financial position, but forking out 100 middle-tier spirit stones was still far beyond his means. As for Song Chao, he could hardly take out a middle-tier spirit stone under Zhang Xian's beguilement back then, so asking him to take out 100 at once was clearly asking too much. In other words, Of all of them, Zhang Xian was the only one who could afford the document. The price sure was steep. Taking the distressed expressions before him into sight, the young man hurriedly said, "You all find the documentation expensive? You do know that there is detailed information on each and every teacher in here, right? Once you find a suitable teacher, it's just a matter of time before you make the breakthrough to become a 5-star master teacher. By then, you won't need to worry about having insufficient middle-tier spirit stones anymore." There was a huge gap between each rank of a master teacher. While there were limited opportunities for a 4-star master teacher to earn middle-tier spirit stones, 5-star master teachers didn't have such a worry. "Thank you for your concern, but we don't need it." Sighing deeply, Zhang Xian shook his head. 100 middle-tier spirit stones for a document. That was daylight robbery. Besides, Zhang Xian didn't need such a thing either. For one, he had just touched the book earlier, and a replica had appeared in his mind. On top of that, his version was more detailed with indications to mark which information was inaccurate. You don't need it. How could you not need it? Finding a suitable teacher in the academy is of utmost importance. If you take this lightly, you might just find yourself unable to progress a single step forward as a master teacher, and eventually, you might even end up being expelled by the academy. Not expecting the freshman to turn down his offer, the young man froze for a moment before hurriedly trying to persuade them. Rejecting a teacher that one had acknowledged was an extremely troublesome process that could result in dire consequences, so it was extremely important for the freshmen to choose their teacher wisely. If they were to make the wrong decision, their future would be bleak. "We really don't need it. We bought a copy earlier, so we don't need another one," Zhang Xian said. "You have already bought one?" The young man froze for a moment before a thought struck him, and he said, "Did you buy from the True Helios faction instead? I can tell you safely that the documentation they have is incomplete and inaccurate, so you will be far safer buying from me." "If I may ask, what are the True Helios faction and Ashen Moon faction that you speak of?" Zhang Xian asked in confusion. "You don't know?" The young man was shocked for an instant before nodding in realization. "I forgot, you have just arrived in the academy, so it's natural for you to be unaware of it. Our academy has many student organizations, and every single one of them was established by the strongest students in the academy. Our Ashen Moon faction is led by Senior Long Yue, while the True Helios faction is headed by Senior Shuizhenyang." Long Yue, Shuizhenyang. Both of them are esteemed grade 5 seniors, and they possess formidable strength. As long as you join any organization, you will be given the opportunity to receive pointers from the seniors, the young man said proudly. Receive pointers? Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before he understood what was going on. To become a grade 5 student, one had to be a 6-star low-tier master teacher. Often, a teacher would be paired with many students, and this left them little time to care for all of them. Thus, it would be highly beneficial if they could receive the pointers of a 6-star low-tier master teacher outside of lessons as well. Indeed. The academy is filled with many geniuses, and if you can't keep up, you will only lag behind. This means that you might lose the opportunity to go on experiential training and obtain valuable cultivation resources. If you wish to keep up, the only way before you is to join one of these factions," the young man said. Hearing those words, Ruohuan Gongzi, Luo Xian, and the others couldn't help but nod in agreement. Unlike Zhang Shi, they didn't possess extraordinary talent or capability. Unless they received all of the resources they could get, it was impossible for them to stand out amidst all of the geniuses in the Master Teacher Academy. If they couldn't stand out, they might lose out on many valuable opportunities offered by the academy, thus limiting their future achievements. Thus, it was inevitable that they would have to join one of these student factions. Alright, you will get to know more of it in the future, so there is no need to worry about it at this point. For now, what is important is for you to find a teacher who fits your criteria, and the documentation offered by the True Helios faction won't be enough for it. I am only saying this out of worry, but you really should buy the one from our Ashen Moon faction. Not to brag, but our senior Long Tsang Yue received a much higher placing than senior Shui Zhenyang in the annual tournament. The young man continued to advertise the book in his hand. I appreciate your gesture, but we really don't need it. If the book only cost 1 or 2 middle-tier spirit stone, Zhang Xian could still consider buying it. But 100? That was clearly exploitation. How could he agree to it? Thus, he decided to turn down the offer. Seeing that the few freshmen before him were still unwilling to buy the document after all he had said, the young man's face darkened. You refuse? That won't do. Since you bought the documentation from True Helios faction, you must buy the one from our Ashen Moon faction as well. Otherwise, I can tell you that you will face a lot of trouble in the future for offending us. The smile had disappeared from his face, and his tone was menacing. Face a lot of trouble? Are you threatening us? Zhang Xian asked impassively. The young man harumphed. Threatening? Of course not, this is just a warning from me in my capacity as your senior. Even though all of the students in the Master Teacher Academy are master teachers, the water here isn't as calm as it seems. Chapter 760, Meeting the White-Robed Lady Once More. Oh? Why is that so? Zhang Xian asked with a smile, unfazed by the other party's threat. There is a limit to the cultivation resources, training fields, and opportunities that the academy can offer to the students each year. Even slots for working as the receptionists or attendants of the various schools don't come easily. If you offend our Ashen Moon faction, I can guarantee you that we possess more than sufficient power to ensure that you won't be able to land yourself any missions or tasks year after year, making it impossible for you to earn even a single academic credit, the young man said. As a powerful student faction in the academy, it wasn't too difficult for them to make the life of a freshman a living hell. Unless... The young man paused. Unless you join our Ashen Moon faction. Only if you join us will we extend our umbrella of protection to you. No other faction will dare to seek trouble with you, and there are also many faction-based missions and tasks that you will be able to participate in to earn academic credits. More importantly, if you join now, we can give you a copy of our teacher information documentation for free, sparing you from the additional expense. There are so many benefits from joining the Ashen Moon faction. But there is no such thing as a free lunch in the world. What will we have to give in return? Ruohuan Gongzi asked. Since the faction was willing to offer its members so many benefits, surely it had to receive something in return. Otherwise, who would be so kind-hearted as to open a charity in the competitive academy? Simple. Once you become a member, you must obey the leadership of the Ashen Moon sect. On top of that, you must pay an academic credit to the faction each year and help manage the businesses of the faction, the young man replied. Pay an academic credit to the faction. Help manage the businesses of the faction. Everyone fell into deep thought. As they had expected, such a sweet deal couldn't possibly be without its shortcomings. Putting aside how they didn't have a single academic credit with them at the moment, even if they did, there was no academic credit that came easily. 1 academic credit each year was definitely a huge sum for them as grade 1 students. At the same time, they couldn't help but be shocked by how lucrative factions were. If the faction were to have 100 men, wouldn't that mean that they would receive 100 academic credits annually? It was no wonder the grade 5 seniors would devote their time to establishing student factions and offering pointers to the members of their factions. With such benefits, they would do it if they were in the other party's position as well. As for the businesses, their primary function was probably to finance the expenses of the faction. After all, be it to build connections, conduct activities, or to reward the contributions of its members, they would surely need a source of income for its operations. As master teachers, the students all had supporting occupations, so they could contribute to the finances of the faction through offering pills they had forged or weapons they had smithied. For one, the young man before them who was marketing the teacher information documentation to them would probably have to hand the profits earned over to the faction eventually. The young man harumphed. That's right. You only have two options now. You can either buy the document or join our faction, or else you can look forward to endless trouble in the academy. Zhang Shi, Ruohuan Gongzi, Song Chao, and the others quickly turned their sights over to Zhang Xian. The latter had already become their pillar of support, so in times of difficulty, they couldn't help but subconsciously look toward him for help. My apologies, but we will be taking neither of the options. Zhang Xian shook his head. He wasn't interested in the book nor the benefits the faction had to offer. No matter how powerful the student factions were, could they be any greater than becoming the junior of one of the 10 great master teachers? Since he'd already turned down the latter, how could he possibly be, in the least, interested in the former? You have guts. You'd better pray that you manage to find a strong backer in this event, or else be prepared to be put through living hell in the academy. Seeing that the group before him rejecting his offer, the young man glared at them ferociously before flinging his sleeves and leaving. Zhang Shi, what should we do if they really come knocking on our doors? Song Chao and the others asked worriedly. They didn't have Zhang Xian's capability or backing, so unlike him, they couldn't afford to offend a powerful organization in the academy. Zhang Xian waved his hands. We are in the Master Teacher Academy, so they dare not go too far. If they really try to pull something, I will look for School Head Mo and School Head Zhao to intervene in the matter, so you don't have to worry. For the time being, let us focus on finding a teacher for you first. Since they were master teachers, even if they wished to provoke another student, they would have to play within the rules. And in a game of rules, Zhang Xian was confident that he could leave them on the verge of a breakdown. Putting aside a mere student faction, even all of the 10 great master teachers might not be a match for him in that regard. Hearing Zhang Xian's promise, the others felt a little reassured. All right, we will be depending on you then. As the group made their way to the passageway, they encountered a few other factions such as the Descending Lunar Faction and Demon Assembly Faction. They attempted to persuade them to either join their faction or purchase their intelligence as well. Zhang Xian casually took hold of their documents, and after noting that they were all around the same as the one offered by the Ashen Moon faction, he turned them down politely. Seeing the freshmen refusing all of their offers and rushing straight to the public lecture, the seniors in charge of selling the documents and promoting their factions shot them looks of sympathy. If one wanted to soar in the academy, there were two conventions they would have to go through. 1. They had to find themselves a suitable teacher. 2. They had to join a faction. Otherwise, if they were to go independent, they would be vulnerable to any trouble, and every single step they took would be fraught with difficulties. Academic credits would fall beyond their reach, causing their progress to stagnate. Not bothered by those arrogant seniors, Zhang Xian led the group straight toward the passageway. A long queue had formed at the entrance of the passageway. On the very first stage, a 40-year-old teacher was currently in the midst of his lecture. Despite the loud bustle in the surroundings, the crowd beneath could still hear his voice resounding by their ears clearly, as if he was speaking to them personally. The core of cultivation lies in the heart. In the consonant spirit realm, one seeks to achieve a harmony between the body and soul, and in order to temper one's soul, one has to temper one's heart first. According to a plaque hanging on the stage, he was a 6-star high-tier master teacher from the apothecary school named Li Yuan, and the content of his lecture was regarding cultivation in the consonant spirit realm. After listening to it for a short moment, Zhang Xian nodded. Even though the middle-aged teacher's lecture was still miles away from matching up to him and there were several mistakes in his understanding, Zhang Xian still had to admit that the content he delivered was novel. If it was anyone else who was listening to this lecture, he might just receive a stroke of inspiration and advance even further in the consonant spirit realm. However, it was useless to Zhang Xian. This Li Shi from the apothecary school is very detailed in his explanations, and he is very generous as well. If you were to become his student, you should be able to get a huge discount off his pills, sparing you a lot of money. With a hushed voice, Zhang Xian swiftly introduced the profile of the middle-aged teacher on the stage. They had participated in the master-teacher tournament alongside Zhang Xian, and they knew that he possessed the ability to view the content of a book without even flipping its pages. Thus, they weren't too surprised by his revelation, and they took a mental note of his words. Students were given 3 days to select their teacher after this event, so there was no hurry. Most students would use this time to sort out their choices before making their decision. Let's continue on. After gaining a clear assessment of the unique traits and capability of the middle-aged teacher, Zhang Xian gestured for the group to proceed on. The next teacher in the line was from the physician school. His lecture was regarding the fusion of the way of medicine into cultivation, allowing one to remain resilient in the face of severe illnesses. If you were to learn from this teacher, you might not improve as fast as you would under the teacher from the apothecary school, but he will help you build a strong foundation which will be beneficial to you in the future. Zhang Xian introduced. In the Master Teacher Academy, students could choose to join one of the 10 schools, and once they did so, they would have to put the corresponding supporting occupation as their second priority after Master Teacher. Naturally, joining a school would grant the students certain privileges as well. For example, if one were to join the apothecary school, they would be able to purchase pills at a discounted price. If one were to join the physician school, they would gain access to documents regarding the study of the human body, allowing them to build up a strong foundation in their cultivation. The blacksmith school had valuable physical body cultivation technique manuals, the beast tamer school had private mountains filled with rare beasts, the painter school had high-tier paintings that allowed one to calm their mind, enhancing their rate of cultivation. All in all, each school had their own strengths. Most students would usually choose based on their interest and proficiency in the occupation. After walking around for a while longer, Zhang Xian slowly lost interest. Thus, he eventually searched for a less crowded area to stop at and took out an empty book. Taking out a brush and an ink slab, he swiftly copied down the accurate details which he had gathered from the documents compiled by the various factions, as well as what he had observed through the public lectures. I have written down the details regarding the teachers in this book, feel free to browse through it. It should be enough for you to find a suitable teacher. This book, which had been verified using the Library of Heaven's Path, had no errors whatsoever. With it, Ruohuan Gongzi and the others should have no trouble finding a suitable teacher for themselves. Ruohuan Gongzi and the others nodded. By corroborating the content of the book Zhang Xian compiled with the public lectures they had just listened to, they would have more than enough information to make a judgment themselves. There was no need for them to bother Zhang Shi over the issue anymore. While you all are looking at the book, I will go take a walk around. Passing the book to them, Zhang Xian stretched his back lazily. Just as he was contemplating whether he should make his way to the Terpsichore school or demonic Tunist school, he suddenly caught sight of a silhouette which sent a jolt through his body. Is that her? It was an elegant white-robed figure walking amidst the bustling crowd. Despite the clamor around her, her presence seemed to bring about a soothing aura to the surroundings, as if a calm painting. This was the exact same sensation that he had felt from the white-robed lady whom he had met at the verdant mountain back in Huanyu Empire. The world was big, so Zhang Xian had thought that he would never see the other party ever again after their abrupt parting. But that familiar disposition and silhouette. Could it be her? Fearing that it was just an illusion and he might lose sight of her the next moment, he dared not turn his eyes away from her. Despite the congestion ahead, the crowd seemed to open up before the white-robed figure through some mysterious force, creating ample space for her to walk through. Yet, despite this bizarre phenomenon, there didn't seem to be a single person amidst the crowd who had realized it yet, as if it was a perfectly ordinary occurrence. What an incredible ability! Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes. This phenomenon could only be produced by the comprehension of spatial laws. Those students had clearly moved from their original positions, but it seemed to them as if they were still standing on the same spot. Even Zhang Xian didn't possess the means to do the same. Is it really her? Zhang Xian muttered in a daze. Back when he'd first met the white-robed lady in the verdant mountain, he had sensed that the other party's cultivation wasn't too high. That was why he'd rushed forward to save her upon seeing that she had been encircled. Yet, when he was suffering a backlash due to the incompatibility between his soul and body, she was the one who'd intervened and facilitated an impeccable fusion between his soul and body. Such an ability was far beyond Zhang Xian's current means. From this, it could be seen that she had concealed her true strength. Even at this time, he was still unable to gain a clear grasp of her strength. Flaws. Zhang Xian muttered, but the next moment, he froze. She isn't using a battle technique? He'd thought that such manipulation of space could be considered as the usage of a battle technique, so he tried to check it through the Library of Heaven's Path. However, the Library of Heaven's Path remained completely silent. In other words, the young lady before him wasn't using a battle technique. Otherwise, the Library of Heaven's Path would surely have been able to compile a book on her. So far, he had yet to encounter anything which the Library of Heaven's Path was unable to discern. Who? Bewildered, Zhang Xian was just about to walk forward to take a closer look when the white-robed figure, as if sensing his gaze, stopped and turned around. A beautiful face came into sight. It was indeed the white-robed lady he had met back then. Even though there were certain differences to her facial features due to some kind of disguise she was donning, those were incapable of fooling his eye of insight. With just a glance, he could tell that it was the young lady whom he had met back in the mountains. Unable to suppress his agitation, he rushed up to her and said nervously, "Why, you are here as well." The young lady was scanning her surroundings, as if trying to determine the source of the gaze when she suddenly caught sight of him. Her eyes lit up, and a light smile surfaced on her lips. For an instant, it was as if 100 flowers had bloomed. Chapter 761, You Are a Teacher. That lady carried a unique poise which emanated an explicable beauty when she smiled. Even Zhao Ye's disposition and beauty seemed to pale before her. Forcing himself to remain calm so as to not lose his bearings before the other party, Zhang Xian asked, "Are you a student of this academy?" For some reason, he couldn't help but feel anxious and even a little lost before this lady. This was a feeling he had never felt from anyone before. He was in the Master Teacher Academy due to clearing the entrance examination and becoming a student here. Since the other party was here as well, could it mean that she was a student too? It would be great if that was the case. The thought of being able to spend many of the future days with the other party left him with a tinge of anticipation inside. However, the young lady shook her head. No. Zhang Xian was taken aback. Then, are you the kin of one of the elders here? There were strict rules in the Master Teacher Academy, and other than the students and the staff, no one else was allowed to step onto its premises. If she wasn't a student of the academy, could it mean that she was the daughter or relative of one of the elders here? Otherwise, how could she possibly appear within the academy? However, the young lady shook her head once more. Then, Zhang Xian scratched his head, and just as he was about to continue guessing, a faint but graceful voice sounded by his ears. "Follow me." After which, the young lady before him began walking in a certain direction. "You can speak." Zhang Xian was stunned. He hadn't heard a word from the other party back when they were on the verdant mountain, so he'd thought that she was incapable of speech. Who would have thought that not only could she speak, her voice would be so moving as well? "Of course I can." The young lady rolled her eyes with a smile. This fellow was truly a fool. Back on Verdant Mountain, she had killed a ferocious spirit beast who had tyrannized the region, thus winning her the gratitude of countless other spirit beasts who resided in the area. Therefore, those spirit beasts paid her a visit to express their gratitude, but in fear of disturbing her rest, they ended up gathering and lingering in her surroundings instead. Yet, that fellow had thought that she was under attack and forcefully pulled her down into the lake. They ended up swimming underwater for a long period of time in an attempt to escape from the pursuit of the other spirit beasts. Even at the very end, he thought that he had saved her life. He was truly a funny person. But despite the misunderstanding, she knew that he had done it out of the goodwill of his heart. Considering his bravery in charging into an army of spirit beasts to save her, she eventually chose not to point out the misunderstanding. He had saved her once, and she had returned the favor by resolving the issue regarding his soul. With that, she thought that their fate had come to an end, and they would never meet again. Who could have known that a day would come when they would meet once more? "Are you a student here?" the young lady asked as they walked side by side. "Yes, I am a freshman who have just arrived a few days ago. The last time we met at Huanyu Empire, I was actually just about to head here," Zhang Xian replied. "I see." The young lady nodded in realization. So, he was a student here, no wonder she would see him here. After a moment of silence as they walked amidst the crowd, the young lady suddenly asked, "Have you chosen your teacher yet?" "Not yet. Actually, I have no intention of finding one at all." Zhang Xian shook his head. "You don't intend to find a teacher?" The young lady was surprised. "Why?" Master teachers who had enrolled here sought to further their capabilities and reach greater heights. The insights of a high-ranked master teacher were highly beneficial to one's progress as a master teacher, so why wouldn't one find a teacher? "It's nothing much. I just haven't found a suitable teacher yet," Zhang Xian replied with an awkward smile. It was not that he intended to lie to the other party, but he dared not speak the truth. How could he say that the standard of teachers here was too low, such that their lessons were completely useless to him? If he were to really utter those words, he would be pummeled to death by both teachers and students alike in the next instant. "What kind of teacher are you looking for?" "I might be able to help you on this matter," the young lady said. Even though she didn't have much of an understanding of the teachers in the academy, given her eye of discernment, she should be able to easily find a suitable teacher for him. This. Zhang Xian scratched his head in distress. He had no intentions of acknowledging a teacher at all, so he wasn't too sure how he should respond to the other party's kind gesture. After all, he had rejected even school head Xiao and school head Mo. How could any of the other teachers compare to them? "I think that this teacher is not bad. His explanation of cultivation techniques is quite detailed, and he analyzes them in a systematic manner, starting from the basics before diving into the intricacies, making it easier for the students to comprehend the knowledge he is trying to impart." There was yet another moment of silence between the duo before the young lady suddenly stopped before one of the platforms and gestured to an old man who was in the midst of lecturing a crowd. Zhang Xian glanced at the plaque hanging beside the old man and noted that he was from the Celestial Designer School. Having to deal with complicated mechanisms every day, celestial designers tended to have logical and systematic minds. Such a trait seemed to be particularly useful in the impartation of knowledge too, as such lecturers would slowly build up their reasoning based on sound logic, as if cogs slowly placed into position to form a whole system. This made their lectures far easier to understand and much more memorable. There were many freshmen gathered around him with agitated looks on their faces, seemingly intent on acknowledging him as their teacher. However, while students had the right to choose their teacher, teachers were allowed to choose their students as well. The more capable a teacher was, the more popular they would be amongst the students. Considering the old man's outstanding ability in imparting knowledge, there should be a significant number of freshmen who would apply to his tutelage. However, it remained to be seen how many he would accept. "He is indeed a good teacher, but he isn't suitable for me." Zhang Xian shook his head. "Actually, you don't have to find a teacher for me. I don't intend to acknowledge a teacher for the time being. Let's talk about you instead. What's your name?" "My name." The young lady was just about to reply when agitated exclamations suddenly sounded from the students around. "I heard that a beautiful teacher has arrived in the academy, and she is going to hold her public lecture soon. Let's go and take a look." "What is there to look at?" "We are searching for a teacher, not a partner. I heard that she is a master teacher dispatched here from the Qingyuan Conferred Empire Master Teacher Pavilion to engage in experiential learning. Despite not even reaching 20 yet, she is already a 6-star master teacher, and even the 10 great master teachers have to regard her with respect. Is that true? My uncle is a teacher here, and I heard this news straight from him. If we can acknowledge her as our teacher, we will surely be able to rise to great heights in the future. If she truly is a teacher from the headquarters, her view must be much broader than ours. Right, what is her name? I don't think there is anyone who fits her profile from the teacher information documentation I purchased earlier. She is a new teacher in the academy, and not even the Ashen Moon faction or the True Helios faction has seen her yet, so naturally, they don't have any information on her. However, I did manage to get her name from my uncle. If I recall correctly, I think it is Luo Ruoxin. That is a beautiful name. Alright, I have decided. I shall go and listen to her public lecture. Amidst the bustle, many freshmen and seniors rushed forward excitedly, seemingly fearing that they wouldn't get a good spot if they were to be late. Beautiful teacher. Seeing the excited crowd, Zhang Xian was rendered speechless. Just because a person was pretty didn't mean that they would be good at teaching. Let's head over as well. Hearing the mutters from his surroundings, the young lady shook her head and made her way over as well. You wish to see the beautiful teacher as well? Zhang Xian was taken aback. She was a lady herself, why would she be interested in the beautiful teacher too? The young lady simply flashed Zhang Xian a mysterious smile before proceeding ahead. Zhang Xian was bewildered, but he could only continue following behind the other party's back. Soon, they arrived before a stage. By this point, a huge crowd had already gathered in the area. An old man was currently standing on the stage, tidying it up. This stage seemed to have been erected just a moment ago, and unlike the other stages, it was completely empty except for a plaque that read Luo Ruoxin. Where is the beautiful teacher? Why isn't she here? Are you sure there is no mistake in your information? Mistake in my information? You must be joking. Do you see that elder on the stage? He is Elder Zhou from the apothecary school. Elder Zhou? Which Elder Zhou? Which other elder has the surname of Zhou in the apothecary school? Of course, it is Vice School Head Zhou. Vice School Zhou is actually tidying up the stage personally for the new teacher. It seems like the academy has a really high view of that Luo Shi. Such discussions could be heard amidst the students. Vice School Head Zhou. Zhang Xian was astonished. Of the 10 schools, the apothecary school ranked at the top. Due to the standing of the apothecary school, the various leaders of the school also held incredible prestige as well. For a vice school head of the apothecary school to clean up the stage personally, it seemed that Luo Shi was no ordinary master teacher. Seeing Zhang Xian's expression, the young lady beside him asked, "How is it? Are you interested in taking Luo Shi as your teacher?" Not really. Zhang Xian shook his head. Why? There are so many people here who seem to be interested in her, why aren't you? The young lady asked. Even among 2 master teachers of the same rank, most would choose to acknowledge the one who had come from the headquarters instead of the branch. This was due to the difference in terms of worldly view. Master teachers from the headquarters were likely to have come into contact with higher-ranked master teachers themselves, and their understanding of cultivation tended to be much deeper than master teachers from the branches. Take Luo Qiqi for example. Even though she was only a 5-star apothecary as well, she was able to conduct a lesson for the other 5-star apothecaries in Huanyu Empire. Even if she is a good teacher, she can't possibly be better than me. Why should I acknowledge a person who can't even match up to me as my teacher? Zhang Xian said confidently. So what if the other party had come from the headquarters? Could the cultivation techniques she had learned be more detailed and aligned with nature than the Heaven's Path cultivation techniques? That was impossible. Besides, even though the other students are calling her a beauty, I highly doubt that is the case. If she is truly as beautiful as the others claim her to be, why is she not here yet? Perhaps, she might even be hideous. Zhang Xian continued with a smile. Even though he had never dated before, he knew better than to compliment another woman before the lady he fancied. Otherwise, he could very well incur her ire. Besides, he thought that beauty was just a marketing means for that Luo Shi. To master teachers, one's appearance was nothing more than a facade. What was truly important was their capability. Most likely, the issue regarding Luo Shi's beauty might just be an attempt by the academy to draw more students to her public lecture so as to win her goodwill. It wasn't like such a matter hadn't happened before. Hideous? The eyes of the young lady narrowed into slits. That's right. Don't worry, you will see once she appears. Zhang Xian nodded confidently. Just as he was about to continue, Elder Zhou on the stage suddenly caught sight of something and his eyes lit up. He hurriedly flew over and clasped his fist toward the young lady standing beside Zhang Xian. Luo Shi, you are here. We have already prepared the stage for you. All right. The young lady nodded before turning to Zhang Xian with an unreadable smile. You said that I am hideous, right? Why you are? Luo Ruoxin, Luo Shi. Zhang Xian's body stiffened as his eyes bulged from their sockets. You aren't a student, but a teacher. This is the final chapter of the arc. You are a teacher. This first half of the year really has been a difficult one for me. As some might know, I am working on another novel known as The Records of the Human Emperor on Gravity Tales, and along with Library of Heaven's Path, I had to post 3 chapters on a daily basis, which is quite tough for me while having to juggle my other work. I ended up burning through every last one of my stockpile, and even after leaving the other novel on hiatus, I am still barely scraping through the days. Hopefully I will be able to build a sizable stockpile for me to last the next semester. Anyway, back to the story. I saw many saying that there isn't much story progression recently. I have to admit that the earlier parts of the story are more of like the daily life of Zhang Xian, which I honestly believe is pretty interesting in itself too, but there will be more progression later on, especially as he gradually approaches the top of the master-teacher continent. It kind of feels like the crux of this arc is Zhang Xian found his first love, which is kind of sad. He did live 2 lives, and happy at the same time. He is pretty much invincible in everything else, so I wonder if he will be invincible in love too. Anyway, I think this is the first time Zhang Xian has been face-slapped anyway. The next arc will be Zhang Laoshi's students or teacher Zhang's students. Zhang Xian was flabbergasted. He'd thought that the young lady who seemed to be of the same age as him would be a student of this academy, but who would have thought that she was a teacher dispatched from the headquarters? It was just a moment ago that he'd said that the teacher dispatched from the headquarters would be hideous when it turned out to be the young lady he was interested in. He couldn't help but fidget awkwardly. If the young lady before him could be considered hideous, there would be no one in the world who was deserving of the word pretty. Even though her disguise had dulled her ravishing features, her ethereal disposition and elegant bearing still shone through, making it impossible for anyone to avert their gaze from her. Looking at the silly fellow before her panicking, Luo Ruoxin chuckled softly before turning around and leaping onto the stage. How beautiful! With such appearance, she must be the top beauty of our academy. Top beauty? That student over there, you must be joking. I am from the bewitching devil faction, and I can tell you that Sister Yao Yao is the most beautiful of them all. That's just your own opinion. In my view, Senior Dongxin is the prettiest. I still think that Princess Fei is the best. The other seniors are way out of our league. At least I might still stand a chance with Princess Fei. You wish to woo Princess Fei? Dream on. Haven't you heard how long Xing Yuan has courted her for? Honestly speaking, I am still the most entranced by Luo Qiqi's charms, but it's a pity that she isn't interested in me at all. Upon seeing Luo Ruoxin, a huge commotion broke out beneath. The rumors regarding the appearance of a new beautiful teacher had drawn many seniors here as well. In an instant, excited discussions sounded amidst the huge crowd. There were plenty of beauties in the academy as well, and there was even an unofficial ranking list made on them. However, every individual had their own fancy, so the seat regarding the top still remained contentious. I am Luo Ruoxin, a new teacher of Hengyuan Master Teacher Academy. Paying no heed to the discussions below, Luo Ruoxin began introducing herself. Her voice carried some kind of entrancing property that immediately silenced the bustle below. The topic of my lecture will be how a cultivator can establish harmony between his body and soul in the consonant spirit realm. It is at the consonant spirit realm that a cultivator will start cultivating their soul, and any mistake made in one's cultivation at this point can potentially create a rift between one's soul and one's body, limiting one's strength. After listening for a moment, Zhang Xian couldn't help but be impressed. As expected of a master teacher from the headquarters. The content was simple, but accurate and concise. Even he could not find any problem with it. No wonder the other party could easily resolve the issue regarding the incompatibility between his body and soul. Her understanding regarding the soul and body could be said to be on par with his. And that was an incredible feat. Zhang Xian possessed the Library of Heaven's Path, and he had gathered innumerable books so as to compile the perfected Heaven's Path divine art. Yet, the other party's level of understanding was actually equal to his. It seemed that Luo Ruoxin wasn't just an ordinary 6-star master teacher. Most probably, she was under the guidance of a high-rank master teacher as well. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to have analyzed the consonant spirit realm so thoroughly. Soon, the lecture came to an end. I'll be stopping the lecture here. Last but not least, if you wish to become my student, you just have to clear my test. If you fail it, I won't accept you. Luo Ruoxin waved her hand. Test? What kind of test? We beseech Luo Shi to elaborate more on the matter. It was only at this point that everyone finally awoke from the entranced stupor they were in. They understood that if they could take the other party as their teacher, they would be able to advance their cultivation, and their eyes were gleaming with anticipation. Simple, it's memorizing books. If anyone can memorize 10,000 books within 2 hours, I will accept them as my student. Luo Ruoxin replied. 10,000 books? Hearing those words, everyone nearly fainted on the spot. Even with their photographic memory, memorizing 2,000 books or so was already the limit. 10,000 books. They wouldn't even have the time to flip through all of the books, so how could they memorize all of them? They might still be able to give it a try if the test had been on something else, but this, it was clearly impossible. With such a test, will she be able to get even a single student? Zhang Xian also fell into a daze. He could easily memorize 10,000 books through the Library of Heaven's Path, but it would be a difficult feat even for him if he had to do it manually. For one, he could be spared the additional time spent on flipping through the books in the Library of Heaven's Path, allowing him to go through the content swiftly. On top of that, his mind could process information far faster in the Library of Heaven's Path as well, allowing him to memorize 10,000 books within 2 hours easily. But without it, it was doubtful if even the 10 great master teachers were capable of such a feat. Thus, to bring up such conditions, that could only mean that Luo Ruoxin had no interest in accepting any students whatsoever. Elder Zhou, I will be troubling you to deal with this matter. Leaving behind those words, Luo Ruoxin leaped off the stage with a light smile and headed toward Zhang Xian. Let's go. Zhang Xian nodded, and the duo walked away. Who is that fellow? It seems like he is a freshman. A freshman? How did that freshman get to know Luo Shi? Furthermore, from the looks of it, it seems like they have quite a close relationship. What is going on? Why can't it be me in his place? In what way am I inferior to him? That person is Zhang Shi. As expected of the most outstanding man amongst us freshmen, he is able to even seduce that beautiful teacher. What do you mean by seduce? You are speaking as if Zhang Shi has gotten together with her through unscrupulous means. That's called flirting, all right. Seeing Luo Shi leaving with a freshman, there were many seniors who clenched their fists in anger, furious that they weren't in that freshman's place. On the other hand, the remaining freshmen looked upon the sight with eyes gleaming in excitement, as if someone had done them proud. But regardless of their reactions, Zhang Xian and Luo Ruoxin walked straight out of the crowd without paying them any heed. Soon, they were strolling along the lakeside of the academy. The scent of spring filled the air. A slight breeze blew, and the verdant greenery along the lake danced lightly to it. The brilliant rays of the sun struck the surface of the lake, evoking a beautiful gleam on it. Zhang Xian slowly walked alongside Luo Ruoxin. Even though there was nothing but silence between them, he felt the utmost tranquility in his heart. The various happenings over the past half a year replayed in his head. The time he had spent as a teacher in Tianxian Kingdom, when he accepted his first few students and imparted knowledge to them. The time when he challenged the master-teacher examination in Tianwu Kingdom and met Lu Chong in the midst of it. The time when he stomped into Xianyuan Kingdom and challenged the entire kingdom by himself. The time when he resided in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance and clinched the champion seat in the master-teacher tournament. The time when he accidentally caused some trouble at the cleansing lake in Huanyu Empire, venturing into the underground chamber where they believed Wu Yangzi resided in, and meeting the young lady beside him. In his long journey, his cultivation had advanced from Jinqi realm all the way to Cosmos Bridge realm. His soul depth had also been raised from the initial 0.1 to the current 19.1, putting him on par with even 6-star master teachers. The various figures he had met in his journey flashed across his mind as well. Lu Shi, Zhuang Shi, Kang Shi, Mo Shi. Zhao Ye, Lu Sun, Lu Chong, Shen Bairu, Mou. Be they acquaintances, students, or friends, they were all a part of his life, and they had all played a role in making him who he was. The various knowledge he had acquired in his time also flashed through his mind. Apothecary, painter, beast tamer, poison master. Hong Long. Just as these memories were floating in his head, he suddenly felt an intense rumbling in the library of Heaven's Path in his mind, and it was growing more and more intense as time passed. What is happening? Zhang Xian's eyes widened in fluster. The library of Heaven's Path was his greatest weapon that he could fall back on in dire times. Did something go wrong with it? However, there wasn't even time for him to think the matter through. With his mind on the verge of exploding, the sight before him grew blurrier and blurrier. Eventually, his body swayed weakly and, putong, he collapsed to the ground. Before losing consciousness altogether, he seemed to see Luo Ruoxin rushing over toward him and remarking, "Why is he fainting again? Is his body that weak?" Weak? Zhang Xian felt like crying at this very moment. The previous time he'd fainted was primarily due to the incompatibility between his soul and body, and this time, his library of Heaven's Path was suddenly acting up for no apparent reason. I am really not weak, it is just a coincidence. Not only am I not weak, I am very fit as well. Trust me. However, before Zhang Xian could utter those words, his consciousness had already faded to an endless abyss of darkness. An unknown period of time later, Zhang Xian finally roused from his temporary coma. Opening his eyes abruptly, he realized that he was lying on the bed in his elite sector residence. Following which, Zhang Xian suddenly heard an excited voice, and a beautiful lady with a flawless complexion came into sight. "Teacher, you are finally awake. Little Qi, why are you here?" Zhang Xian asked in surprise. The person before him was no other than the student whom he had accepted back at Huanyu Empire, Luo Qiqi. After leaving the underground chamber, they had left for Hongyuan City together. However, after reaching the city, they had separated as Zhang Xian headed for the academic seat to liaise with Hong Shi and the others while Luo Qiqi returned back to the academy to report on the progress of their mission. "I heard from school head Zhao that you are currently residing in the elite sector, so I came over to look for you. However, on my way there, I saw you fainted by the lake, so I carried you here," Luo Qiqi answered. "I fainted by the lake? Then Zhang Xian frowned. You wish to ask about Luo Shi, is that right? She was beside you when I arrived, and she took a look at your condition and said that you were fine before entrusting you to me, Luo Qiqi replied. Entrusted me to you? So, she has already left? Zhang Xian couldn't help but feel a little disappointed within upon hearing that news. But giving it some thought, they were nothing more than acquaintances who had a prior encounter before enrolling in the academy. The other party had no obligation to send him back to his residence. Besides, she was currently a teacher, and he was currently a student. Regardless of the reason, it wouldn't be appropriate for them to get too intimate with one another. Otherwise, it would reflect badly on both him and her if malicious rumors regarding them were to start spreading. That's right. I heard that Luo Shi only arrived in the academy yesterday. How does teacher know her? Luo Qiqi asked out of curiosity. Based on what she had heard thus far, Luo Shi was a master teacher dispatched here from the headquarters. It was only yesterday that Mu Shi arrived in the Master Teacher Academy together with her, and before that, Zhang Shi had been together with them at Huanyu Empire. Thus, it seemed unlikely for them to know one another. How do I know her? It's just a coincidence. Right, the both of you share the same surname. Is there any chance that you knew one another before this? Zhang Xian asked. Luo Ruoxin and Luo Qiqi shared the same character in their surname, Luo. At the same time, they were also extraordinarily beautiful ladies as well. Could they be related with one another? There are many people out there who possess the Luo surname. You are thinking too much into it. Luo Qiqi couldn't help but chuckle at that deduction as she shook her head. Her teacher had always been a rather intelligent person. Why would he suddenly ask such a silly question? Considering the immense size of the master-teacher continent, there should at least be a few 100 million people in the world who possessed the surname Luo. What were the odds of two people possessing the Luo surname being related? That's true. Zhang Xian scratched his head. It was only in the spur of the moment that he'd asked the question, and he hadn't thought too much into it. How long have I been out for? Zhang Xian asked as he sat up from his bed. Around 3 days. Luo Qiqi replied. 3 days? Zhang Xian was astonished. He was also out for 3 days the previous time. Why did it seem as if he was fainting more and more regularly recently, and for 3 whole days at that? That's right. The 3-day period for students to acknowledge their teacher is already over. Luo Qiqi shook her head with a bitter smile on her face. Her teacher had truly fainted at an untimely moment. These 3 days should have been crucial to the future of the freshman, but he ended up sleeping through it. However, based on what she knew about her teacher, it shouldn't be a huge issue. Since he had rejected even Elder Mo and Elder Zhao, there should be no other person in the academy who would worthy of becoming his teacher. I see. As expected, after hearing her words, the young man before her shook his head, but it didn't seem like he was too affected by the issue. Instead, he seemed to be more worried about his acquaintance instead. So, how many students did Luo Shi eventually take in? If I recall correctly, Luo Shi didn't take in a single student at all. The requirement she set was simply too strict. Memorizing 10,000 books within 2 hours is an impossible feat. Luo Qiqi shook her head. She didn't take in a single student. Zhang Xian was perplexed. Since she was a teacher of the academy, why didn't she take in a single student? Yes. I am not too sure what is going on, but this matter had everyone baffled, Luo Qiqi replied. According to the rumors, Luo Ruoxin had been dispatched to Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy by the headquarters for experiential training, so she should have accepted a few students in order to complete her training. But if that was the case, why did she set such strict requirements? It was as if she was uninterested in accepting any students at all. After pondering for a moment, Zhang Xian eventually shook his head and said, I will ask her about it when I get the chance to. Putting Luo Ruoxin's issue aside, Zhang Xian's attention finally fell on Qiqi, and with just a single glance, he was startled. You have made a breakthrough. The previous time he met her, Luo Qiqi was at Cosmos Bridge Realm Pinnacle, the cream of the crop of the grade 2 students. Yet, in just a few days, she had made the breakthrough to Transcendent Mortal 7 Dan Perfect Harmonization Realm. Yes, it is all teacher's credit. As a reward for the mission, I received school head Zhao's meridian and bone cleansing, allowing me to overcome my previous bottleneck. Luo Qiqi smiled. If not for the meridian and bone cleansing from school head Zhao, even though she was already at Cosmos Bridge Realm Pinnacle, it would have still taken her several months or even an entire year in order to take the next step forward. Beyond Consonant Spirit Realm, one had to not only accumulate sufficient Jinqi but nourish one's soul as well in order to make a breakthrough. It was often the latter that was more troublesome, requiring long periods of time just to increase it the tiniest bit. As a result, there were many grade 2 students who were stuck at Cosmos Bridge Realm Pinnacle, unable to make the final step forward. However, in the meridian and bone cleansing, not only had school head Zhao purified her Jinqi, he had also tempered her soul, thus allowing her to make the breakthrough instantaneously. Yu Feier, Xing Yuan, Wu Zhen, and Yi Qian had also benefited greatly from the meridian and bone cleansing as well. My credit? Zhang Xian blinked. Why was this his credit? And what did this have to do with school head Zhao? Did teacher forget about the mission at the underground chamber? You saved us and helped us retrieve Elder Wu Yangzi's body. That's a huge contribution to the blacksmith school. Luo Qiqi explained. Ah. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian suddenly understood why Yuan Hong's attitude toward him abruptly changed after paying a visit to the school head's office. At this point, Luo Qiqi suddenly bowed deeply and said, Teacher, I apologize for handing the zither forging technique to the blacksmith school without your approval. I ask of you to punish me. She had only managed to obtain the zither forging technique manual with her teacher's assistance, but without the latter's approval, she had handed it over to the school. You are the one who inherited Wu Yangzi's heritage, you can do whatever you want with it. Besides, the best way for the zither forging technique to shine is through handing it over to school head Zhao, so I believe that your decision was the right one as well, Zhang Xian said. Luo Qiqi was the one who had become Wu Yangzi's student, so it was only right for the technique to belong to her. In this respect, it wouldn't be right for Zhang Xian to dictate what she could do with it. Thank you, teacher. Even though Luo Qiqi knew that her teacher would agree to it, she didn't expect him to approve of her actions immediately. After all, the zither forging technique was an incredibly valuable smithing technique which many were dying to lay their hands on. His magnanimity was indeed worthy of respect. After chatting for a moment longer, Luo Qiqi suddenly recalled something and said, Teacher, regarding the matter of Elder Wu Yangzi's old residence, I tried looking into it and there was someone who claimed that they knew where it was. I made an appointment with them tonight, and it is going to be time soon. I will have to head over to meet them. Tonight? Zhang Xian glanced at the window outside, and only then did he realize that the sun was beginning to set beyond the western horizon, and the sky was beginning to dim. I see. Let me grab some food first, and I will accompany you to the meeting, Zhang Xian said after some contemplation. The 3 days of sleeping had already emptied out whatever that was in his stomach. I knew that teacher would be hungry, so I prepared some food. Luo Qiqi chuckled as she flicked her wrist, and a huge spread materialized before her. Thank you. Looking at the delicacies before him, Zhang Xian's appetite was whetted, and he immediately dived into action. While stuffing his mouth, he made use of this opportunity to immerse his consciousness into the Library of Heaven's path. The reason he'd fainted 3 days ago was due to the rumbling in the Library of Heaven's path. Since he had woken up, it was imperative that he should check what had happened to it. As soon as his consciousness entered the Library of Heaven's path, he froze. Something is different about it. Previously, the Library of Heaven's Path had been a large hall with towering shelves filled with books, expanding all the way to the horizon. The basic layout was still the same, but somehow, it felt larger, as if the ceiling and shelves were taller than before, and the area had become more spacious. It seemed like the rumbling had caused several changes in the Library of Heaven's Path. Not only had it grown larger, it had also become much more majestic and grander. Looking at it from afar, one couldn't help but feel intense pressure on one's soul. The Library of Heaven's Path felt like a moon reflected in the water before, ethereal and transient. At this very moment, however, it felt palpable, as if it was a real library standing before him. The Library of Heaven's Path seems to have materialized further, but what is the use of it? Zhang Xian muttered doubtfully. He stepped forward and attempted to grab one of the books on the shelves, but just like before, his hand simply slipped through it. In other words, even though the books seemed much more tangible than before, they were still illusory. They could be seen but not touched. Where are the books I have gathered before? Zhang Xian mumbled as he walked around the library. Fortunately, he soon arrived at a section where the books he had gathered previously were. It seemed like they hadn't disappeared due to the changes in the Library of Heaven's Path. Walking up to them, he casually grabbed one and began flipping through it. Voila! With the flipping of the books, the sight before Zhang Xian blurred as the content of the book dove straight into his mind, etching itself onto it. This. Zhang Xian widened his eyes in astonishment. Even when reading in the Library of Heaven's Path previously, he needed to read the words one by one in order to memorize them. But at this instant, he was able to memorize the content of the book just by flipping through the pages. After several tries, he had verified the matter. As long as he picked up a book with the intention to read it, the content would automatically imprint itself onto his mind, sparing him from the additional effort of reading it. This is great. I will be able to pick up my reading pace in the future. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up in agitation. It seemed like along with the renovation in the Library of Heaven's Path, he had also gained an additional ability. With his newfound ability, he could easily cover several 100,000 books in the Library of Heaven's Path within 2 hours. In the future, he wouldn't need to waste the hard-earned golden pages on assimilating the knowledge within the books anymore. My pace of reading has quickened. Is it possible that my other abilities might have been enhanced as well? Zhang Xian thought. He swiftly extracted his consciousness from his mind and glanced at the chicken drumstick he was currently tearing the flesh out of. Flaws, he muttered. A book appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path, and he swiftly rushed to flip through it. The Thigh of Spirit Beast Boneless Chicken. Cooked by Master Gourmet Wu Bushui of Drunken Heart Tavern using 47 different spices and herbs. It took him just an instant to read through the entire book. Nothing has changed at all. Zhang Xian scratched his head. Just like before, the flaws regarding the dish were compiled in the book. There didn't seem to be any additional ability regarding this. I should try it on some other objects to verify the matter. Perplexed, Zhang Xian turned his sight to the bookshelf before him. The residences in the elite sector were filled with all kinds of amenities that one might require. There were bookshelves filled with books in the residence as well. However, they weren't cultivation technique manuals but books on the geography and culture of Hengyuan City. Zhang Xian was just about to stand up and make his way to the bookshelf when a thought suddenly came to his mind. Thus, he sat back down and muttered, "Flaws." Who? A book appeared in his mind. This. He was only giving it a try out of curiosity, not holding much hope that it would work, but it actually did. A book had really appeared. He swiftly dived into the Library of Heaven's Path to flip through the book. It was a replica of the book which he had intended to take in earlier. He experimented a few more times, and the excited gleam in his eyes intensified. It seems like I can gather books in the Library of Heaven's Path without touching them. Previously, the only way for him to gather a book was to touch it with his hands. However, with his newfound ability, he could compile books just by laying his eyes on them and willing it. In other words, gone were the days where he had to run frenziedly in libraries to gather books. Recalling those embarrassing days where he had been caught running about in the various libraries, he couldn't help but feel a little moved within. And more importantly, his efficiency to gather books had also been boosted immensely. Does this ability apply to other objects as well? Zhang Xian wondered. He had only experimented with books so far, and he was curious to see if this ability was extended to other items as well. To his disappointment, however, it didn't work on other items. It seemed like his newfound ability only worked on books at the moment. He could gather books just by laying his eyes on them, but as for artifacts and other items, he still had to lay his hands on them in order to find their flaws. Frustrated, he shook his head. He had gotten excited over nothing. If he could discover the flaws of other objects without touching them, he would be spared a lot of trouble, and his ability would be far more versatile as well. Perhaps it was due to the Library of Heaven's path having yet to reach the required level or an innate flaw in the heavens itself, but he simply couldn't realize the ability at the moment. Or maybe I am just lacking practice, I should give it a few more tries just to be sure. The indignation Zhang Xian felt made him unwilling to give up, and he began experimenting once again. And while he was busy experimenting with his abilities, Luo Qiqi, who was sitting beside him, was stunned. She had bought a table full of delicacies for her teacher to enjoy, but the latter. One moment, he would pick up a chicken thigh, stare deeply into it, and shake his head in disappointment. The next moment, he would look around the room, stare intensely at another object he'd laid his eyes upon, and clench his fists in excitement. It was as if those items were his friends. Countless different expressions flickered across his face as he lay their eyes on them, be it melancholy, graveness, relaxed, excitement, delight, frustration. Could he have gone bonkers due to the coma? Or did he lose a part of his soul somewhere? Surely a normal person would express so many emotions not toward a chicken thigh but her, right? No matter what, she was one of the most beautiful ladies in the academy. Yet, she couldn't even hold a candle to the charm of a chicken thigh. Just as she was sighing deeply, she saw her teacher stretching his other hand forward to tear another chicken thigh before staring at both thighs even more intently. It was as if he was responding to her doubts. If one chicken thigh wasn't enough, how about two? Luo Qiqi. Chapter 764, Hu Yao Yao. It took a while before Zhang Xian was finally done inspecting the chicken thighs and put them down. It seemed like, for objects other than a book, laying his sight on them wasn't enough. He still had to come into physical contact with them in order to collect their information in the Library of Heaven's path. Nevertheless, it is good enough that I am able to gather and read books faster than before. Zhang Xian thought in satisfaction. It was embarrassing that a noble master teacher like him had been forced to run around in the library in order to collect books in the past. With the newly upgraded Library of Heaven's path, he would be able to remain graceful while taking in new knowledge. Soon, he completed his meal and stood up. I'm done. Let's go. Back at the underground chamber where Wu Yangzi had been imprisoned before his demise, he had said that he had left his most important heritage and treasure at the 3 stars of the Earth Dragon. However, it had been 2,000 years since his passing, and putting aside whatever the 3 stars of the Earth Dragon was, even finding his old residence was a huge trouble in itself. Luo Qiqi had been looking into the matter ever since her return, and in the past 2 days, while she was taking care of the unconscious Zhang Xian, she'd happened to receive some clues to the matter. All right. Luo Qiqi nodded. As they were walking out of the residence, they suddenly saw a young lady standing before the door, seemingly intending to knock on it. Upon seeing Zhang Xian, she quickly clasped her fist and bowed. Zhang Shi. Ran Xiao Xiao. Zhang Xian asked doubtfully. It was the person who had challenged him back when he'd first received the keys to the residence, as well as the second runner-up in the Grade 1 annual tournament. She had challenged him to a duel of impartation of heaven's will, only to end up falling under his control and defeating the first runner-up Wu Chan and third runner-up Xiao Nan in his stead. Yes, I came here to thank Zhang Shi for your guidance. Ran Xiaoxiao smiled. Initially, she was extremely displeased to hear that a freshman was going to take up the first residence available to grade 1, which was also the reason why she'd marched up to his residence upon hearing the news and challenged him to a duel. Yet, the other party had been able to point out the various flaws in her cultivation directly, and it was then that she'd realized the gap between her and the other party. Under the other party's guidance, she'd been able to overcome her bottleneck, achieving a long-awaited breakthrough in her cultivation. Out of excitement, she'd rushed to his residence in order to express her gratitude. At the same time, she had also heard some worrying news, so she came over to inquire about it as well. There is no need to stand on ceremony. We are fellow students, so it's only right for us to help one another. Zhang Xian waved his hands casually. If not for Zhang Shi's guidance, I would still be stuck at my previous bottleneck, unable to take a step forward in my cultivation. Ran Xiaoxiao was just about to bow deeply to express her gratitude once more when she suddenly caught sight of the figure beside Zhang Xian and widened her eyes. Senior Qiqi. She had been too excited to see Zhang Xian earlier on that she'd neglected the person who was standing behind him. To her astonishment, it was the most famous grade 2 senior of the academy, Luo Qiqi. Luo Qiqi nodded in response to her. Ran Xiaoxiao was one of the top 5 geniuses of the grade 1 students, so it was natural that Luo Qiqi had heard of her as well. You too. Ran Xiaoxiao blinked rapidly in shock. Luo Qiqi was extremely famous in the Master Teacher Academy, not just because of her incredible talent or her beautiful features, but more importantly, it was said that she had an extraordinary background as well. She was known to be very diligent, spending most of her time studying and cultivating. Thus, she rarely had any interactions with the opposite sex. Why would she be in Zhang Shi's residence? On top of that, the sun had already disappeared beyond the horizon, and darkness had set into the sky. For two people of the opposite gender to meet under the same roof in the middle of the night. What could they be up to? I am learning pill forging from Zhang Shi. He is my teacher. Luo Qiqi replied. Teacher? Ran Xiaoxiao widened her eyes in disbelief upon hearing those words. Zhang Shi is just a grade 1 student in the academy, and on top of that, he only arrived a few days ago. For a grade 2 genius like you to acknowledge him as your teacher. Not to mention, you are also one of the school belles. If word spreads, won't a riot occur amongst the men of the academy? If you are here to thank me, there is really no need for it. As fellow master teachers, we should help each other wherever we can. Not wanting to be delayed here, Zhang Xian waved his hand as he prepared to leave with Luo Qiqi. Hearing those words, Ran Xiaoxiao suddenly recalled the other reason she was there, and she quickly spoke up. Actually, there is another matter I need to talk to Zhang Shi about. Oh. Over the last few days, as I was walking around the academy, I heard some news. The student populace is saying that you have offended quite a few student factions, and it seems they are going to coordinate with one another to deal with you. Ran Xiaoxiao said worriedly. I offended the student factions? When did I? Zhang Xian was taken aback. He did refuse to purchase the teacher information documentation from the factions back then, but surely, they wouldn't be that offended over such a small matter. Besides, it should be his freedom to decide whether he would buy something or not. For student factions consisting of master teachers to band together against him over such a small matter, that was plain ridiculous. You didn't offend them. Seeing the confusion on the other party's face, Ran Xiaoxiao shook her head. These student factions spend the entire year gathering information on each teacher in order to compile them into a book so as to sell them to the freshmen. However, their business ended up being foiled by Zhang Shi, and their morals were even questioned for their doings. How could they possibly not be angry? I foiled their business. Zhang Xian scratched his head in confusion. But I didn't do anything at all. What the heck did I foil? I have been unconscious the past 3 days, so what could I have possibly done? Or are you saying that I actually sleepwalked and did something that even I am unaware of? You didn't do anything. Ran Xiaoxiao sighed deeply in frustration. Does Zhang Shi know the freshmen Jun Ruohuan, Song Chao, and Luo Xian? I do, Zhang Xian replied. The 3 of them have distributed their own version of the teacher information documentation in your name for free, and the content of the book has been shown to be even more detailed and accurate than those sold by the other student factions. This has caused a huge uproar amongst both the freshmen and seniors alike, Ran Xiaoxiao said. They distributed the teacher information documentation for free? Zhang Xian's eyelids began twitching uncontrollably. That explained everything. It was out of goodwill for the trio that he'd compiled a version of the teacher information documentation based on the information he had gathered from the others so that they could better choose their teacher, but those fellows actually distributed them freely to the other freshmen. Not to mention, they even used his name. While the other factions were selling theirs at 100 middle-tier spirit stones each, they were giving them away for free, and their version was even more accurate at that. That was practically spoiling the market. Of course they would incur the ire of others. However, it was unlikely that Jun Ruohuan and the others were intentionally trying to screw him over. Most likely, they were just intending to build up a good reputation for him amidst the student populace, just that they failed to think the matter through. As a result, they ended up offending most of the student factions. Once a freshman offends the student factions, he will find himself hindered throughout the academy. Zhang Shi, you must be careful. If things really come down to it, it might be necessary for you to consider joining a powerful student faction so as to come under their protection, Ran Xiaoxiao advised. She was a member of a student faction as well, so she was conflicted for a moment after hearing the news. But eventually, she still decided to inform Zhang Xian of this issue. Zhang Xian might be powerless against the student factions as an individual, but if he could come under the umbrella of one of the more formidable factions, it would be harder for the other factions to do anything to him. Thank you. Knowing that the other party had chosen to inform him of this matter at the risk of falling out with her faction, Zhang Xian thanked her earnestly. To be honest, while it might be troublesome, he didn't really fear the student factions. After all, from the start of his journey from Tianxian Kingdom until now, there was no lack of people he had offended. If they knew what was good for them, they would learn to stay out of his way. Otherwise, he didn't mind showing them his true prowess. Even the boss of the Spirit Emporium was nearly driven insane by him, let alone a couple of students. I will be taking my leave then. After saying all that needed to be said, Ran Xiaoxiao clasped her fist and left. Those student factions are troublesome to deal with. Teacher, you must be careful. Luo Qiqi said with a frown as she watched Ran Xiaoxiao's departing back. Having spent several years in the Master Teacher Academy, she had seen plenty of the filthy doings of those student factions. If they were to really put their mind to it, they could even force a student to retire voluntarily in just a single day. This was the reason those without backing or power had to join a student faction. Otherwise, they would be too vulnerable to survive in the academy. I understand. Knowing that the other party was saying those words for his sake, Zhang Xian nodded. Luo Qiqi was worried, but considering how Zhang Xian had school head Mo and school head Zhao's protection, those student factions shouldn't dare to act too brazenly. Thus, she decided not to think too much into it. The duo walked along the streets, and soon, they arrived at a gazebo beside the lake. This is the location I have agreed on with the other party, Luo Qiqi said as she came to a halt. Who is it? Are they a student of the academy? Zhang Xian asked. I am not too sure either. I sent the request at the Sucker Tower, and someone responded to me. We made an appointment to meet here. Unfortunately, there are no additional details regarding the other party's profile, Luo Qiqi replied. I see. Zhang Xian nodded. The Academy's Succor Tower was a place where the students or even teachers could post requests such as to seek assistance on certain subjects they were unsure of or to help them with a certain problem in exchange of certain rewards. Often, the reward tended to be academic credits. In a sense, it worked in a similar fashion to the Wall of Dilemma in the physician guilds. It had been 2,000 years since Wu Yangzi had disappeared, and the map of Hengyuan City had also changed significantly over the years. Without any additional assistance, it would take forever for them to track down the location of his old residence. Thus, Luo Qiqi decided to post a request at the Succor Tower, promising academic credits in exchange. She thought that it would take quite a long period of time before she could receive an answer, but who would have thought that she would receive a response on the third day? However, as the identities of respondents and responders were kept anonymous by the Succor Tower, it was impossible for her to know who the other party was. Nevertheless, considering that they were in the academy, the other party should either be a student or a teacher. "Let's wait a little longer then," Zhang Xian said. At that moment, a breeze suddenly blew, and a figure abruptly emerged from the darkness of the night. Under the dim illumination of the stars, one could barely make out the silhouette of a lady. She was tall, but what particularly stood out was her slender waist, which one could easily wrap around with a single hand. But despite her slender waist, she had a curvaceous figure which would send the hearts of males running in agitation. Who? Soon, the figure landed in the gazebo. Finally, Luo Qiqi managed to catch sight of the other party's appearance. She was a young lady in her late 20s. Just like Yu Feier and Luo Qiqi, she had a beautiful face with distinctive features, but unlike the duo, she commanded a bewitching air around her. "Senior Yao Yao." Taken aback, Luo Qiqi quickly clasped her fist and greeted her. "Oh, so it's you." Recognizing Luo Qiqi and well, Hu Yao Yao asked curiously, "Are you the one who is seeking out Wu Yangzi's old residence?" "That's right." Luo Qiqi nodded. "Do you have any news regarding that?" "I do know something about it." Hu Yao Yao nodded. Hearing the other party's confirmation, Luo Qiqi clenched her fists tightly in agitation. However, at that moment, she suddenly caught sight of the look of confusion on her teacher's face, so she quickly filled him in. "Teacher, she is a grade 5 student from our academy, Senior Hu Yao Yao." "Hu Yao Yao." Zhang Xian scratched his head. "Hu Yao Yao, Luo Qiqi, Ran Xiao Xiao." Was this a trend in the academy? Why did all of the ladies he had met had such names? "You don't know me?" Seeing the confused look of the young man before her, Hu Yao Yao was perplexed. She walked up to him, and with an entrancing smile, she asked, "What's your name?" "Me?" For some reason, Zhang Xian hesitated for a moment before replying earnestly, "I am Xian Xian." Chapter 765, Negotiations, Pu. Luo Qiqi nearly fainted on the spot. However, with her sharp wits, she swiftly understood what kind of bizarre thoughts were in her teacher's mind, and a helpless smile appeared on her face. Her teacher was a person of great capability, but sometimes, his thoughts tended to be eccentric. "Xian Xian?" Hu Yao Yao asked, bewildered by the bizarre name she was hearing. Fearing that the other party might misunderstand his intentions, Luo Qiqi quickly replied, "He is my apothecary teacher, Zhang Xian." "Zhang Xian? So, you are the freshman who wrecked the business of our student factions?" Hearing that familiar name, Hu Yao Yao suddenly recalled something, and a glint flashed across her eyes. A chilling smile emerged on her flawless face as she examined the young man before her, determined to see what it was about him that dealt such a heavy blow to the finances of so many student factions at once. Ever since the establishment of the Master Teacher Academy, there had never been a freshman who had caused such a huge uproar in the academy before, resulting in nearly all of the student factions incurring huge losses. However, no matter how she looked at the young man before him, he had an honest face and an earnest gaze, completely unlike how the rumors made him out to be. She couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Hu Yaoyao turned to Luo Qiqi and asked, "You just said that he is your apothecary teacher. What is going on?" Just like her, Luo Qiqi was a reputable figure in the academy, famed for both her talent and beauty. In terms of prestige, the other party might be beneath her at the moment, but that was only due to her young age. She had no doubt that with sufficient time, Luo Qiqi would be able to surpass her. Thus, she had been keeping tabs on this young lady since shortly after she enrolled at Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. Yet, such an outstanding person actually said that Zhang Xian was her apothecary teacher. This was particularly astonishing. "Just like I have said, Zhang Shi has been guiding me on pill forging," Luo Qiqi replied shortly, choosing not to go into detail. "Since you know where the old residence of Elder Wu Yangzi is, can you tell us where it is? Once we confirm the location, I will compensate you with 2 academic credits." "I don't want the 2 academic credits." Since Luo Qiqi was unwilling to explain, Hu Yaoyao also chose not to probe into the relationship between her and Zhang Xian. "You don't want them?" Luo Qiqi frowned. The Sucker Tower was basically like a market, a platform for students to liaise with one another and conduct trades. Since the other party had accepted the request, it could only mean that she had acknowledged the reward as well. If so, what did the other party mean by rejecting the reward? Fiddling with her hair, Hu Yaoyao replied with a smile, "I can tell you where Elder Wu Yangzi's old residence is, but you have to tell me the reason why you are willing to spend such a heavy price for the information." It had been 2,000 years since Wu Yangzi had disappeared from the face of the world. There had been many people who had inherited his old residence in this period of time, so any treasure left there should have already been swiped clean by others. Yet, Luo Qiqi was offering 2 academic credits to purchase information about his old residence. It was clear that she was up to something. "Pardon me, but I can't tell you that." Luo Qiqi shook her head. Wu Yangzi was the most famous blacksmith in the history of Hongyuan Empire, so there was no doubt that the treasures he had in his possession would surely be of exceptional value as well. There might be a few who would attempt to do them harm out of greed if news regarding Wu Yangzi's treasure was to be made known. "Oh." Seeing that Luo Qiqi was unwilling to talk about it, Hu Yaoyao said, "If you refuse to say it, it only means to say that our deal is through, and I won't be able to tell you where Elder Wu Yangzi's old residence is located. Let me just tell you this, I am the only one who knows where it is. Even if you were to search through all of the books in the academy, you won't be able to find his old residence without my help." Luo Qiqi turned to Zhang Xian, and upon seeing him shake his head, she said, "I see, but we will still have to turn down your offer if that is the case. We will manage it one way or another." Following which, she clasped her fist and bowed. "I apologize for wasting your time. We will be taking our leave now." After which, she left the gazebo together with Zhang Xian. They were determined to find Wu Yangzi's treasure, but even so, they knew that they mustn't let anyone else learn of it. Otherwise, not only would they be unable to obtain the treasure, their lives might even be threatened as well. Wait a moment. Seeing that the other party would rather abandon the deal than speak of their goal, Hu Yaoyao's lips curled up as she said, "Since you are unwilling to speak of it, allow me to change the conditions then." Luo Qiqi halted in her footsteps and turned around. "You should have heard the news by now, right? Zhang Xian has offended nearly all of the student factions in the academy, including mine. As long as you hand him over to me, I will show you to Wu Yangzi's old residence." Hu Yaoyao said. "Hand him over to you?" Luo Qiqi frowned as her face darkened. "Hu Yaoyao, I respect you as a senior, but this is a grave humiliation. You want me to hand my teacher over to you?" She had already introduced Zhang Xian as her teacher, but the other party still demanded that she hand him over. This was no different from a direct slap to her face. As the saying goes, a day as one's teacher, a life as one's father. One if she couldn't even protect her own teacher's dignity, what remaining pride would she have? Realizing the problem in her words, Hu Yaoyao swiftly apologized. Ah. I apologize for my inappropriate remark. Even though Zhang Xian is your teacher, he is a grade 1 student of the academy as well. I ask of you to pardon my discourtesy. Teachers were highly respected in the master-teacher continent. Heaven, earth, kin, teacher, sovereign. Two beneath the heaven and earth, the position of one's teacher was even above that of one's country. It had been ingrained so deeply into her that Zhang Xian was a grade 1 student that she'd accidentally neglected the fact that he was Luo Qiqi's teacher as well. To insult one's teacher before one's face was grossly disrespectful. To display such blatant discourtesy for another's teacher despite being a master teacher, her reputation would be sullied if this were to be made known to others. After apologizing, she turned to Zhang Xian and said, Zhang Shi, since you have come here with Luo Qiqi, you must be interested in locating where Elder Wu Yangzi's old residence is as well. As long as you agree to my conditions, I will tell you where it is. What do you think of it? Seeing that the other party had decided to turn her efforts to him instead, Zhang Xian asked with an earnest smile, what are your conditions? It's simple. You ruined our bewitching devil faction's opportunity to earn money, so it's only right that you make up for it. As long as you join us and help us earn 100,000 middle-tier spirit stones within a year, I will tell you what you want, Hu Yaoyao said with a smile. Bewitching devil faction. Zhang Xian was taken aback. Is that your faction? There were many benefits to having a faction, so most of the top grade 5 students would choose to create and manage their own factions. Zhang Xian seemed to recall hearing something about the bewitching devil faction before, and from the looks of it, it seemed to be related to the young lady before him. Seeing the look of confusion on her teacher's face, Luo Qiqi sent a telepathic message over to fill him in. Hu Yaoyao, her name carries the character Yao. At the same time, she possesses bewitching charm. As a result, her faction is also known as the Bewitching Devil Faction 3. That's right, I am the leader of the Bewitching Devil Faction. Seeing that the other party was ignorant of this, Hu Yaoyao was a little speechless. To offend so many student factions despite not knowing who their leaders were, this fellow sure was impudent. I see. Coming a realization, Zhang Xian nodded. Gazing at the seductive young lady whose voluptuous figure could easily hasten a man's breathing, he said calmly, I am not interested in joining any faction. As for earning 100,000 middle-tier spirit stones, I don't even have that sum myself, so how could I possibly earn that for you? Choose another condition. He was the type of person who would never allow himself to be placed in a disadvantageous position, and yet the other party wanted him to pay? That was a good joke. Change another condition. Sure. Hu Yaoyao stretched her back lazily, accentuating the beautiful curves on her body. Serve as my servant for a year, and I will forgive you for crossing my bewitching devil faction. At the same time, I can tell you where Wu Yangzi's old residence is as well. Servant? Zhang Xian was speechless. That lady was truly going further and further. Shaking his head, he replied, I wouldn't even accept you as my maid, and you want me to be your servant? You sure have a vivid imagination. Zhang Xian meant those words. In his opinion, the only thing that was commendable about the other party was her beauty, but even that paled far in the face of Luo Ruoxin. He wouldn't even be interested to have her serve as his servant, and yet she wanted him as her servant? Dream on. Hearing the arrogant words from the young man before her, Hu Yaoyao's face reddened in fury, and she snapped, then there's no way our negotiation can go on. I wish you luck in your endeavor then. Born with both talent and beauty, she was a prideful person. She had always been respected and admired by others, and she'd thought that she was already doing the other party a favor by offering to take him in as her servant. Yet, that fellow turned her down so haughtily. He would regret his decision. After saying that piece, she turned around, and with a step, she soared into the distance. Exerting her strength as a transcendent mortal 9-Dan chrysalis realm expert, she swiftly disappeared from the view of the duo. In truth, the Bewitching Devil faction was one of the larger student factions in the Master Teacher Academy. As its leader, she had no lack of academic credits or spirit stones. The reason she wanted Zhang Xian to join them or to serve as her servant was because he had embarrassed all of the seniors with his previous deed. If she could make him submit to her, her reputation would surely soar amidst the student populace. However, that fellow didn't know what was good for him. Since the other party had already rejected her so bluntly, there was no room for negotiation. After Hu Yaoyao left, Luo Qiqi turned to Zhang Xian and said, "She is the leader of the Bewitching Devil faction, and I heard that she spent a great deal of effort compiling the information in the teacher information documentation. Yet, her effort ended up in vain, so it's inevitable that she carries some hostility toward you. She was intentionally trying to humiliate you, so there is no need to take it to heart." "Don't worry, I won't." Zhang Xian smiled. "But with this, we have reached an impasse. Alright, leave this to me. I will find a way to make her spit out the location of Elder Wu Yangzi's old residence obediently." "Leave it to you." Luo Qiqi frowned. Hu Yaoyao is an extremely prideful and cunning person. It won't be easy to make her speak. In the past, there had been a handful of people who had attempted to do in Hu Yaoyao, and all of them had ended up paying a heavy price for their actions. Even with her teacher's capability, it wouldn't be easy for him to make Hu Yaoyao reveal the location of Elder Wu Yangzi's old residence. "Don't worry, wait for me at my residence in the elite sector. I will be back very soon." Zhang Xian instructed with a smile before he activated the Eye of Insight and followed Hu Yaoyao's trail. In any case, he was already in a hostile relationship with the Bewitching Devil faction. There was no way he could mend the relationship anymore, so perhaps he could attempt another method instead. "Teacher." Seeing Zhang Xian pursue Hu Yaoyao, Luo Qiqi froze for a moment before yelling, "Senior Yaoyao is a student of the Terpsichore school. She specializes in soul attacks, so you must be careful." However, Zhang Xian's figure had already disappeared amidst the night sky. Perhaps, he hadn't heard her words at all. Chapter 766, The Price of the Origin. Heavy water. Zhang Xian didn't hear Luo Qiqi's voice. Executing the red dust heaven ascending step, he flew silently at an altitude close to the ground. His Eye of Insight had grown extremely sharp after undergoing the third acknowledgement of Celestial Master Teacher. Even though Hu Yaoyao's trail was extremely faint, he could still see it as clear as day. Where is she heading to? Zhang Xian was perplexed. The trail first lingered around the lake before abruptly heading for a hill. The hill looked extremely remote, and it seemed unlikely that there would be anyone staying on it. Why would the other party visit this hill at this ungodly hour? Under the concealment of the night, Zhang Xian advanced ahead. The hill was filled with many short shrubs, and at its very peak was an octagonal gazebo. There were many of such gazebos throughout the academy. The purpose of it was so that the students could stop by them any time they wished in case they suddenly stumbled upon an enlightenment in their cultivation. Often, inspiration came suddenly and left as abruptly. If one were to miss that moment, one might miss it forever. Sticking close to the greenery, Zhang Xian slowly advanced toward the gazebo. Before long, he saw a bewitching figure standing within. Starlight fell upon her blurred silhouette, creating a beautiful painting. From afar, that entrancing profile was reminiscent of a beautiful goddess of the night, rendering it impossible for one to pull his gaze off her. Other than Luo Ruoxin, Zhang Xian had never felt anything toward any women before. Nevertheless, he still had to admit that Hu Yaoyao did possess fatal charm. "Isn't it about time for you to come out?" At that instant, the entrancing figure abruptly spoke up, breaking the silence of the night. "Did she notice me?" Zhang Xian jolted in astonishment, but soon, he shook his head. In order to not leave a trail behind him, he had executed the red dust heaven ascending step to remain floating in the air. On top of that, he had been keeping a safe distance from Hu Yaoyao, following her only by her faint trails through the eye of insight. With all of the safety precautions he had taken, it would be difficult for even a Saint Realm expert to notice his presence. The next moment, resounding laughter suddenly erupted. Ha, Yaoyao sure is sharp. I only arrived just a moment ago, but you have already noticed me. With the sound of the wind, a tall figure suddenly emerged from the other end of the hill and leaped into the gazebo. Judging from his appearance, he seemed to be in his early 30s. His aura felt powerful, reminiscent of a torrential river. Just like Hu Yaoyao, he was a transcendent mortal 9-dan expert as well. Upon reaching such a realm, it was already impossible to discern the other party's age through their outer appearance. He might look like he was in his 30s on the outside, but chances were that he was already in his 50s or 60s. Even so, given the lifespan of 200 years for a transcendent mortal, he could be considered to be young. Before Hu Yaoyao could speak, another faint voice sounded by the side, and yet another figure walked into the gazebo. As a cultivator of the true Helios art, your presence feels like the searing sun in the sky. How can anyone possibly miss that? It was a lady as well. She seemed to be of the same age as Hu Yaoyao, and she possessed a beauty not paling to the latter. However, the dispositions they commanded were the complete opposite of one another. As if a succubus, every single movement and gesture from Hu Yaoyao would tug at one's heartstrings, leaving one tempted to make her their own. On the other hand, the other lady had an aura of poise and indifference. Despite her beauty, the coldness she exuded left others standing a distance away, not daring to get close. True Helios art. Could that man be the leader of the true Helios faction, Shui Zhenyang? Zhang Xian thought as he looked at the two new figures in the gazebo. He had heard by chance that the leader of the true Helios faction was a grade 5 student named Shui Zhenyang, so he immediately thought of the other party. Just as Zhang Xian was deep in thought, another figure stepped into the gazebo. Indeed, that fellow sure doesn't know how to conceal himself. Otherwise, Yaoyao wouldn't have noticed him so easily. It was as if that figure was a specter of the darkness. If he hadn't talked, not even Zhang Xian would have noticed him. It seemed as if he had just materialized out of nowhere. Long Sangyue, you might be able to tread silently in the night due to your frigid moon art, but you ended up making yourself neither a man nor a woman. Don't even compare yourself with me. Shui Zhenyang harumphed. You are the one who is neither a man nor a woman. Are you asking for a beating? The young man named Long Sangyue flew into a rage. Do you think I will be afraid of you? Come. It has been too long since I have been able to work those joints of mine. Shui Zhenyang drove the Jinqi in his body, and the next moment, an aura reminiscent of flames gathered around him as he prepared to make an attack. Ha, a defeated loser dares to speak so haughtily to me? Since a fight is what you want, a fight is what you'll get. Long Sangyue sneered coldly. In an instant, a tense atmosphere weighed down between the duo. Enough. To fight right after meeting one another, can't the both of you tone down a little? Don't you know we have some important matters to discuss tonight? Hu Yaoyao harumphed in displeasure. Along with her words, the tense atmosphere gradually dissipated. The duo harumphed coldly and said, "Humph, I guess we can fight on another occasion. For now, we should discuss about the matter we have at hand. Since everyone is gathered. Dong Xian, you can start now." With the duo toning it down, Hu Yaoyao turned her gaze to the other lady of the group and gestured for her to begin. The cold-faced lady, Dong Xian, paused for a brief moment before reporting, "Okay. I went to that place and observed it for 2 days. Just as Zhenyang has said, I am certain that the item exists. However, the difficulty in obtaining it seems to be greater than our initial estimates. I fear that it will be hard to succeed with just the 4 of us. Indeed, it won't be easy for us to succeed. Putting aside the difficult geographical terrain where the place is located, those two fellows guarding it are also beyond our capability, Shui Zhenyang said with a frown. We will have to ensure that our plan is foolproof, or else we might potentially end up losing our lives there, Long Sangyue added. Ensure that our plan is foolproof? Do we have the time to do so? If I recall correctly, that item is going to be ripe in just a month's time, and the moment it happens, those two fellows will surely consume it to refine their bones and meridians. By then, we will have lost our opportunity to get it. Shui Zhenyang flung his sleeves and harumphed. Zhenyang is right, we won't have a chance if we don't act decisively. We have to get to it before it ripens and obtain it as soon as it happens. Otherwise, if we lose this opportunity, it will take us at least several dozen years of hard work in order to reach Half-Saint. Hu Yaoyao nodded with a frown. We all understand that logic, but the problem lies with how we can breach the defense of those two huge fellows. Shui Zhenyang shook his head before turning the cold-faced young lady. Dong Xian, you are famed genius of the beast tamer school. Do you have any idea how we can deal with those two fellows? Those two fellows possess the ancient bloodline, so it will be hard to distract them with ordinary items. Didn't I tell you all to purchase some origin heavy water before I went to scout? That item has the effect of purifying the ancient bloodline, so it might work as a bait against them. As long as we can distract them momentarily, we might be able to get to the fruit. Dong Xian said before turning the group to ask, so, have you bought it yet? How can we possibly have the money to buy it? A single bottle of it costs more than 100,000 middle-tier spirit stones. It is not like you don't know how much money we have at hand. Shui Zhenyang replied with a bitter smile. Even as grade 5 students, it was still hard for them to fork out 100,000 middle-tier spirit stones at once. Origin heavy water. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian's heart suddenly leaped in agitation. In total, there were 5 dawn to the quintuple incandescence golden body. Even though he'd fused many physical body cultivation techniques with it, he still needed 4 items to serve as a catalyst to cultivate the last 4 dawn. The third incandescence happened to require the origin heavy water. However, Zhang Xian had known its name before. Regarding its appearance or where he could find it, he had no idea whatsoever. He'd never thought that he would receive news about it from the mouths of these people. It seemed like they were intending to purchase the origin heavy water. 100,000 middle-tier spirit stones. That is equivalent to 10 high-tier spirit stones. My, how expensive it is! Zhang Xian exclaimed in frustration within. Based on his understanding of the quintuple incandescence golden body, if he wanted to fully cultivate the third incandescence, he would at least require 10 bottles of the origin heavy water. However, he only had 10 high-tier spirit stones at the moment, which was far from sufficient for him to obtain enough of it. Hearing Shui Zhenyang's complaint, Dong Xian asked, "Didn't a new batch of freshmen arrive just a few days ago? I thought you all would have made a killing there." The student factions of the academy would usually be able to earn substantial wealth for themselves whenever new students arrived in the academy. On top of that, this was the once-in-decade massive intake of the academy, and according to the rumors she had heard, there should be 30,000 freshmen this year. With so many of them, even if they were to earn just 3 middle-tier spirit stones from each of them, they would still easily scrape together 100,000. Make a killing. We even made a loss, you know. Haven't you heard of that matter 2 days ago? Long Sangyue shook his head in frustration. Heard of what? I came here as soon as I could to deliver this news to you all, so I haven't heard anything yet. What happened? Did the academy interfere in the matter? Dong Xian asked bewilderedly. She had spent the past few days in that area in order to gather intelligence for their operation. As a result, she had only returned earlier that night, so she wasn't too sure about the happenings in the academy. However, it was a convention for the senior to exploit the freshmen, and the academy had never interfered with it in previous years. There shouldn't have been any reason for them to do it that year. Besides, the practice had its merits as well. Firstly, it could dampen the conceit that most freshmen came in with, teaching them that there was always a mountain higher than the other. Secondly, participating in a faction also served as a social platform for master teachers to interact and coordinate with one another, which helped them to build camaraderie to deal with the otherworldly demons if the time ever came. Since the academy didn't interfere in this matter and the freshmen had no choice but to step right into their scam, the various factions should have been able to earn a substantial sum. But if that was the case, why did the others look as if they had made a loss instead? A freak amidst the freshmen wrecked our entire business. The entrance examination this year was conducted by your Beast Tamer school, so you should know some details regarding it, right? Long Sang-yue said. Yes. Dong Xan nodded. It was conducted by Elder Mo, and he started preparing for it since several months ago. As a genius of the Beast Tamer school, she had a close relationship with most of the teachers and elders there. As such, she had been let in on the matter regarding the entrance examination even before it had been announced. In preparation for the examination, Elder Mo had been going around capturing malicious spirit beasts, and Dong Xian had helped capture a few of them herself as well. The rules of the entrance examination this time around are rather simple. Obtain the inner core of a transcendent mortal for Dan Pinnacle Spirit Beast, and you will obtain 1 point. Do you know how many points that freak of a freshman earned? Long Sang-yue asked. It had been several days since the freshman examination had finished. As the leader of the Ashen Moon faction, it wasn't too difficult for him to gather some intelligence regarding the happenings there. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.